As you've probably gleaned from the title of this post, I am an urban explorer. My speciality is finding and investigating structures that, for lack of any better description, just don't make sense. Sometimes it's something small, like a house that's slightly wider on the inside than the outside. That's quite common and often goes unnoticed. Maybe a door gets minutely wider as you open it, then returns to its original dimensions when it gets closed up, and there's the big stuff. The stuff I'm actually interested in, rooms that shouldn't exist, impossibly high ceilings, that sort of thing. I don't need post anything here. I tend to just read all your spooky stories and personal experiences, which make me feel like my experiences aren't that unusual to be having. As bizarre as that sounds, I wanted my first post here to be a document of all the weird encounters I've had with strange places over the years. This post will still be that. But if I'm going to talk about all that, I also need to go into the events of the last month, which ultimately led to all my friends taking a step back from urban exploration. Altogether so, a bit of background. I live in the UK, in Manchester. Like all cities, it has nice parts and not so nice parts, as much as I love the city. Sometimes it feels like there isn't much to do. At least nothing that interests us, so every few weeks, me and my group of 4 friends hop on a train and go somewhere else. We pack bags full of camping equipment, torches, waywis, vests, plenty of rope, and anything else we think we might need. We scope out a spot, which normally involves checking social media for people talking about how they had an unusual experience near an abandoned building after dark, or how a family pet disappeared near a decommissioned train tunnel. Stuff like that. Once we have a spot, that's likely a big kind of thing we're after. We figure out what we might need, what we are likely to encounter. etc. Most explorations are fairly routine. We stay the night nearby, watching the area, to see if there are any guards or squatters. 9 times out of 10, there aren't. Then we make our entry. Typically, we open the door or poke our heads in through a window first. Just see what we're dealing with. You never know when you're going to walk through the front door without a care in the world and fall down. A bottomless pit. No, that hasn't happened yet. It very nearly happened to one of the guys last year, but we've been very cautious since then. Some of my favorite places include, I love the possibly endless train tunnel. It was a lot of fun. I won't say where it is. I don't want a bunch of people to go there and ruin the spot with graffiti, rubbish, and syringes and the like. Actually, I just looked it up, and apparently the police walled up both ends and sealed the tunnel a few months ago. A shame. Definitely my favorite place to visit. I hope no one ended up cluelessly wandering in. I was in there with another guy, and I remember very vividly the moment when we crossed over into the twilight zone. As my mate put it, he wasn't far off. When we were walking, we could feel the air gently moving through the tunnel. Even though we couldn't see the other end in the darkness, we knew there was an opening that air was blowing through. There was the occasional scatter of a squirrel or rat or something, which freaked us out every time it happened, sending the pair of us into a brief laughing fit over how much we had jumped. And then, after walking for about 5 minutes, the subtle breeze stopped. When it happened, we both instantly realized, and stood motionless. It was like both ends of the tunnel had closed. There were no more rats or squirrels, just the pair of us, alone in the quiet darkness. Naturally, we were grinning like giddy kids. My torch didn't work, nor did my mate's. We tried tugging the ropes secured around our waist to let our friends at the tunnel's entrance know that we were past the threshold, but they couldn't feel any tension in the rope from there, and we kept on walking. This tunnel wasn't very long, but you couldn't see the daylight at the end because the tunnel actually had a slight curve in it. In the past, before the anomaly formed, you'd walk through the tunnel, and in 2 minutes, you would be out the other side. We walked for 20. The slight curve in the tunnel leading us round in a wide arch until we reckoned we were actually facing back the way we came. We stood there, theorizing how far the tunnel carried on curving around, debating whether to go further. We eventually decided not to. I didn't fancy walking for hours just to end up finding a dead end or something. When we reached the opening, we had come from, the sounds of the world returned. Such an eerie feeling, being outside time and space. That's absolutely not a proven theory, by the way. That's just where I'm going with that. It's like once you step past the threshold, the world outside stops existing. Or maybe it's you that stops existing for a moment. These strange places always smell the same. It's always the same persistent metallic odor. Sometimes it gets so intense that your eyes start to burn. Sometimes it can help you to find a threshold dot. There was one house we went to a couple years ago. One of my friends knew someone who said their house suddenly had an extra floor. That was extremely exciting. It's not every day you get to pinpoint the exact day that the building changed. Most of the time we got to a place to find that the building had been that way for a while, but this one was fresh. Houses are particularly odd to visit. Sometimes it's just an extra room. So we have to wander through the entire house until we find a room that smells like metal, often with weird pictures. On the walls and no windows dot, this house was different. A whole new floor had seemingly grown overnight. And the best part, it wasn't just one new floor dot. After exploring the house for probably a good 2 hours, our watches stopped working. We counted 16 additional floors in this 2-story house. The only reason we stopped climbing the endless staircases was because our buddies outside ran out of rope. That's another thing. We never go into a property without a length of rope tied around us, fed back to 2 guys standing outside, mainly so the guys inside can find their way out. We typically carry a few 60 and 70 meter lengths of mountaineering rope each, giving us about 500 meters when tied end to end. At one point we carried closer to 700 or 800 meters, but at that point it got tough to transport. We all wake up in cold sweats from nightmares, where we found ourselves lost in an abandoned building with no windows or doors, breathlessly diving down endless hallways, crying out for anyone to find them. Not pleasant. I remember the place we went to that first made the rope. A necessary precaution, there was a small patch of woodland somewhere on the west coast of Wales near a residential area. Again, no specifics. Not because I don't want to ruin this spot. This time, I straight up don't want people flocking there and getting themselves killed. We saw on social media, mainly Reddit, thanks, that a couple people's pets had gone missing around there. They thought a predatory animal might be in the woods, so they sent animal control to do a sweep, which didn't take long since it's an area of about 50 trees. It came up clean. That's what got our interest peaked. We showed up and started doing some surveillance. We had a theory that the anomaly was only manifesting during the night, which we had seen once or twice before at other locations. Probably something to do with the decreased visibility. We were right. We went in after dark and suddenly the wooded area of 50 trees turned into a dense forest seeming to go on for miles. Me and a buddy walked for 30 minutes before we stopped and headed back. Even with the rope tied around our waists, leading back to our friends at the edge of the woods, we still got lost. It was dark enough that we could barely see our ropes. We ended up circling around trees and each other's lines. We couldn't call out to the others either, since sound works differently once you're past the threshold. That means we couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear us. After a while, awkwardly stumbling around in the dark, single file with my hand on her shoulder, pulling our ropes constantly to keep the tension. We made it out. That was the most frightened I have ever been when exploring a place. We don't do forests anymore. Some guy, one of my friends used to hang out with, always wanted to find out what caused the anomalies to form. We tended not to tell anyone about the anomalies, since the news and the police always cover up any instances. And we didn't want our friends or family getting taken in the night by G-men. That being said, some people came to know about them, this guy being one. He had a theory that a power plant he lived near was actually a secret underground hadron collider. That sounded awesome, so of course we checked it out. It turned out that the power plant was one of these strange places. We managed to dodge to surprisingly lax security and got into a window to find that the geometry inside made absolutely no sense. There was no ceiling, first of all. Just walls and doors that extended upwards into the darkness. A lot of rooms were either too big or far too small to make sense. And Plenty of them were in weird places relative to the building's dimensions, not by far. The weirdest part was that this power plant was still in use. Workers still went in through the front door and came out hours later like regular plant workers, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the interior of their building looked like something fresh out of Stephen King's nightmares. I started believing that guy after seeing all that. I don't know about the Hadron Collider theory, but that building definitely has something to do with. Something Dot in terms of which of us came the closest to finding out why these weird structures exist and how they keep forming. I reckon he got the closest. And then last month, my mate and I went to check on him at his house. Apparently, he hadn't been responding to texts or calls, which was strange since he never just dropped off the grid like that. Even if he was going on holiday or something, he would let someone know. When we got to his front door, it was slightly ajar. We got worried at that point, so we pushed it open. Inside was a vast expanse of darkness. No walls, no ceiling. Just a flat floor extending inwards until the light from the outdoors dissipated far into the distance. A couple days later, we went in with our equipment and ropes. The area was far wider than the house's floor plan. I think we ended up walking the length of a football field, if not more. I was in his house a couple months before this. Now he was gone, along with all his possessions, his ugly carpet, his old armchair, his goldfish, everything. Every trace of him gone. We optimistically thought that he might have come home from work to find his home like that and tried walking in. We thought that if we walked far enough and called out his name loud enough, that he might find his way back. We didn't want to grapple with the possibility that the anomaly formed while he was still inside, and that he just blinked out of existence along with his possessions. The police taped up the doors and boarded the windows, and a week later his house was knocked down. The anomaly was gone. Believe me, we tried to get back through the threshold, but it was gone. We stopped trying to find out the cause of the strange places after that. We just dropped our theories and left it alone. We don't go near the power plant. We don't even talk about it. This is the first time I'm mentioning it. My friends moved on from urban exploration for a while. They stepped up on their families and stable jobs, and they wouldn't risk any of it to explore another strange house or abandoned warehouse. That lasted all of a month. We still go out to abandoned buildings and train tunnels, as if in defiance of our fears. Yes, we have fears. Fears that we will wake up one day in a black void that was once our home. But for now, none of us are going to stop doing what we love. We just can't leave it alone. I actually tried to walk away from it all, but it's just too exhilarating. I get too much of a buzz from stepping past the threshold. That feeling of time standing still. Sounds of the outside world being replaced with stone silence. Like hands clasped over my ears. I live for that feeling, knowing that to the rest of the world. For that brief moment, I simply don't exist. My brother died when I was 7 years old. He was 13. He drowned in the lake down the street from our house. My parents never touched his room. They tried once, but they couldn't do it. Too raw. After that, the door just stayed shut. His room became a kind of museum of him. That was 11 years ago. His room still looks the same. This morning, while I was packing for college, I thought I'd finally go in there. My plan wasn't anything dramatic. I just wanted to grab a few hoodies, maybe a keepsake or two to take with me. Something to hold on to when I got homesick. Full transparency. I'd been in his room plenty of times before. I've sat on his bed. I've looked through his shelves, but I've never really gone digging. That felt wrong, and I really had no inclination to. I just miss my brother. That wasn't my intention today either. It wasn't my intention to find a stack of DVDs shoved into the bottom drawer of his dresser. There were 3 of them, just labeled 1, 2, and 3. The only DVD player in the house is still hooked up to his old TV. Everything else went streaming years ago. For a minute, I told myself not to do it. They weren't mine. They probably didn't matter. I picked up some of the items I had collected, put the DVDs back in his drawer, and returned to my room. Tonight they started calling to me. I know how that sounds. I know you're thinking it was just my curiosity eating at me, but it wasn't like that. It felt physical. A pull in my chest. So I crept back across the hall, slipped into his room, locked the door behind me so my parents wouldn't hear, and I put in the first DVD. It was a home video. I didn't even know we had any. I don't remember my parents ever owning a camera. The video starts with static, then clears just enough to show something. The picture is muddy, warped. It could be the living room, but the furniture looks wrong. Everything is too big or too small, shifting every time the frame jitters. Sometimes it almost like a bedroom. Sometimes like a hallway. No faces, no clear shapes. Just flickering shadows that don't match what the voices are saying. Because there are voices, familiar ones. Laughter, clinking dishes, and my mom calling my brother's name. It sounds like family in the background, just out of sight. I hear my brother's laughter, and the sound swallows me whole. It rings through my head, bouncing off the bones that make up my skull. Then, beneath it is another voice. Low, deliberate, close enough that you couldn't miss it. You haven't noticed yet. Then the video cut off. Just like that, I scramble to replay it, not even thinking about the other 2 discs still stacked under the TV. I just wanted to hear him laugh again. That laugh. I tried not to think about the end, though the fear of it was crawling slowly up my spine as I hit play, because the way it spoke, it sounded like it wasn't part of the recording at all, like it was speaking to the camera. To me, I pressed play, again, this time pausing every few seconds, desperate to make sense of what I was seeing. But nothing held still. Everything on the film looked almost familiar, like a room you swear you've been in, but can't place. The walls are a little too narrow, and the colors are washed out enough to make it something you've never seen before. It made me feel like my brain was short-circuiting. Then I froze the frame just before the moment you laughed. And there it was. A caption, faint and yellow, burned into the corner of the screen. July 30th, 2015. 7 months after my brother drowned. My first thought was that it was a glitch. It had to be. The camera must have been off by a year. There's no other explanation. I forced myself to breathe and to shove back the rising panic. Then I pressed play again. His laugh filled the room. And for a second, my fear washed away. It was just him again. He was alive, warm, present. A bittersweet rush of comfort, and then the voice returned, closer this time. Wet against the microphone, broken and cutting in and out like static. You noticed? I ripped the DVD out of the player and threw it across the room. I don't even know why I did it. Adrenaline, I guess. My hands were shaking so hard, I couldn't control myself. I'm trying to think of logical explanations. I want to believe there's one. But every reason I come up with feels paper thin. I just bolted back to my room and dove under the covers. Like, that would help. I don't want to watch the other videos. I don't, but I can feel them pulling at me. Like, they're not finished. Like, I owe them something. I can't sleep. It's dark. It's late. The rain just started. The bathroom. Faucet always drips, but tonight it sounds so much louder. You could almost confuse it for footsteps. His body lay there on the metal table. I looked at the hole on his back near the right kidney with my fingers interlaced, thinking, a lot of people might rub their chin or lean on the counter, but I'd learned not to do that in med school. Just lace your fingers together, nitrile glove on nitrile glove. It avoids a lot of contamination issues. All of us at the coroner's office had been putting in some serious overtime. Since the hurricane had hit the coast, the news said it was the worst ever recorded. Rain still poured down and the streets were half flooded even if you weren't in the storm surge. Our facility was close to capacity and we needed to get those bodies properly ID'd before sending them to a morgue. What I was dealing with here was something different. A day after the storm hit, this particular body was recovered from a street flooded with the surge. When we ran prints, he had an exceptional criminal record, and the finger width hole was assumed to be from a bullet. A plausible conclusion would be that he was looting. Things weren't adding up, though. What had been labeled an entry wound looked a lot more like an exit wound to me. It was larger, rougher, and didn't have any abrasion from the bullet entry. Details like that were unreliable on bodies that had been in the water for a while. But I saw no evidence of bacterial decomposition. It was also a bit strange that the man had clawed at the entry, but I supposed it was a reaction to the pain. There was a simple solution to this puzzle. If it was a gunshot wound with no exit, there would be a bullet. I turned him onto his back. Normally, someone would have helped me, but we were totally swamped. Rolling over a dead body weighing more than you do is hard work, but this wasn't my first rodeo. I started the Y incision to open up the chest and abdominal cavities. Really? You're doing that now? Flynn was about 14 hours into his shift. I couldn't blame him for wanting to get the easier bodies out of there and keeping the rest on ice so he could go home. I'm the doc. I call the shots. I'm working on this one, but I can do it alone. You just keep processing those others? Yeah. His voice was resigned, not resentful. Shoulders shrugged in his scrubs. I didn't need to see behind the surgical mask to know he was frowning. This was a tough week for all of us. Once I'd gotten the abdomen open, I started checking his left side. The first thing I noticed was that the kidney was missing. A lot of people only have one kidney. That wasn't what I was looking at. Both arteries and the ureter had been severed. Perhaps the bullet had passed through those since there was notable tissue damage and no bleeding. However, the condition of the connective tissues meant that he still had the kidney until very recently. And bullets don't make organs disappear. So what does make organs disappear? Perhaps it had moved around once it wasn't attached to anything. Stranger things had happened. The whole abdomen had to be examined anyway, so I just carried on. Figuring I would find it at some point, I discovered a large hole in the liver. Removing the deep red organ carefully, I turned it over in my hands. There was only one hole. If a bullet was in him, it would be there. It felt heavy, the cold wet mass wanting to slip from my gloves. Normally, I would expect a liver this large to be fatty, but didn't look like it. Curious, I put it on the scale. 2.4 kg. That was big. I went to write the weight down and to take a break. Normally, an assistant would do it. I took off my gloves to write notes on everything so far, massaging my stiff neck for a moment. When I checked the clock, it was 10:45 p.m. I'm grabbing a coffee. You want one? Yes, please. Actually, if it's not too much trouble, can you grab me a water too? Good idea. Flynn was right. I'd forgotten to drink any water, or eat, or do anything but work the last 5 hours or so. I poured a couple of coffees and tucked 2 water bottles into my pockets. Making my way back down the fluorescent white hallway, I shouldered through heavy doors that pushed open from either side. They were convenient for moving bodies or when you were carrying multiple beverages. You doing all right? I asked. Doing. Just fine. Appreciate the drinks, Doc. He gave a nod. I downed the entire water bottle in one go, then drank about half of my coffee. I checked my phone for anything from my husband. Text me when you're heading home. Love you. He was probably asleep already. Sleep sounded pretty good, but I had a kidney to find. I put on my lab coat, gloves, mask, and glasses. Seeing the liver, I froze in confusion. In the sterile white light, it looked deflated. This had been a long shift, but I wasn't imagining things. My notes said 2.4 kg, but the scale now read 1.1 kg. Hurrying over, I stared at the green LED numbers, as if they might change again. I was about to pick the liver back up when I noticed a wet, dark trail streaking from the metal plate of the scale onto the counter, then down to the tile floor. Flynn, can you come look at this? I tried to sound calm, but the rapidity with which Flynn came over suggested that I had not succeeded. What am I looking at? He asked. I weighed that liver at 2.4. Wrote it down, got us coffees, and when I came back it weighed 1.1 and there's this trail going across the floor. So, part of it fell. His conclusion was rational, but not correct. If it fell, why did it leave a trail that goes halfway across the room before fading out? Also, I feel compelled to mention that the body was in the water. Oh, his voice was low and concerned. This is bullet hole guy? Yep, We stood there looking at the gruesome trail, a smear which started dark and clear at the scale, but was untraceable about halfway across the room. We got to find it, don't we? His eyes were visibly concerned, even behind the goggles. Of course he was right, but the question was not whether we had to find it, rather what it was. There was a growing certainty in my mind that it was not an inanimate object, but rather a living organism. I'm not a squeamish person. There's no need to go into details here, but I've seen a lot of things working as a coroner. There are a lot of insects associated with decomposing bodies, sure. None of those insects are 1.3 kilograms. My best guess is that it's an eel. Check the floor, get everything it could crawl under away from the walls. Slither under, whatever eels do on land. It can't have gone far. We checked the small space under the cabinets, all around the room. I checked under the instrument table, everywhere I could think of. I jumped when I heard metal clatter to the floor. Flynn cursed. My first instinct was that the creature had knocked something down, but Flynn had just bumped a tray accidentally. I could tell his nerves were thin, as were mine. It's not here. He said, "Do you want me to check the next room?" I glanced at the doorway. The rubber sweeps on the base of the door looked secure. I doubted anything could have gotten through. Let's just slow down and think for a second. The whole search had been a panicked reaction. When we had started, my intuition had been that whatever had come out of the man's liver would be laying on the floor somewhere. Since it wasn't, we would need a new strategy. Blacklight. I said dot behind his mask. Flynn nodded in agreement, quickly going to a drawer and pulling out a black light shaped like a baton with 2 long bulbs encased in a plastic frame. He flipped it on, carefully walking toward the scale. The trail glowed a sinister yellow-green. Initially, the dark smears were obvious even to the naked eye, but where they had first seemed to disappear now lay a faint, glowing trail. What are those little marks along both sides? Do eels have, like, flippers? I think some of them do. Perhaps my voice indicated it, but looking at this strange track, I was becoming less confident we were searching for an eel. When the trail meandered across the floor toward a gurney, a nauseous feeling started in my stomach as it went. Up the wheel, Ben coiled around a stainless steel leg. Acid began to enter my throat. A closed body bag lay at the end of the blacklight's trail. We're turning the body over. Flynn didn't want to, but he nodded. We turned the black bag over on the stainless steel gurney, and I found what I was looking for. A finger-sized hole through the plastic. Oh God. Flynn's hand went to cover his mouth in horror, but his reflexes stopped the rubber glove a few inches short. All right, take it to the freezer. Fast, let's go. With no hesitation, we pushed the gurney, the body bag, the body and whatever was inside it through the swinging doors, then turned down the hall. With one hand on the gurney, I reached out for the long, horizontal handle on the stainless steel doors of the insulated freezer room. I was in denial when I felt something sharp on my glove. It had to be the zipper on the bag, I told myself. As my head whipped around, Flynn screamed. A breathy noise escaped my lips. The front of it had some kind of teeth or mandibles, evenly spaced and radiating from what must have been its mouth. Behind that small sharp legs, perhaps an inch long, were going across the back of my glove. They must have been sharp because they had easily cut through the nitrile and left small pinpricks of blood. The whole thing was jointed, armored, looked like bone. All of this I tell you from memory. Part of me wants to think that I misremembered. The thing on the back of my hand, but I know what I saw. It burned into my retinas like a photograph, even though I violently flung my hand the moment I saw it. Pointed legs dug into my skin, and the length of the monstrosity was pulled out from the body bag and flung across the hall. As I shook my arm as hard as I could in panic, it left a wet mark where it hit the wall, then flopped to the ground. Before I knew it, the thing had scurried toward the exit doors, legs scratching at the base of them, then found a tiny gap right in the middle, as it forced its way under. I noticed with horror it must have been about 3 feet long. I ran back the way we had come, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. I couldn't tell you whether I would have sprayed it or bludgeoned it, but I needed to stop it. If nothing else, I needed to know what it was. I needed it desperately. Flynn stood frozen in the hall as I kicked the exit doors open, stepping out into the parking lot in the downpour, searching puddles and currents of water under dim yellow streetlights. A deep puddle had formed around an overflowed storm drain. A little ways out, and I saw the water rippling back and forth as if a fish were swimming in it. That was the last I ever saw of it. That storm drain led right back to the ocean. From whence it came, after perhaps 30 seconds in the rain, I came back in, completely soaked in trailing water on the tile. Flynn just stared at me. "Sorry," he said. For some reason I laughed. Nothing to apologize for. You did everything right. What was that? I had no idea. So it's just something that came up out of the ocean and eats dead bodies? Taking the glove off to look at the wounds on my hand, I shook my head. Gunshot wound was supposed to be cause of death, remember? His eyes went wide behind the goggles. And I couldn't help but remember the marks on the body where the man had clawed at his back. I wondered what would have happened to me if that thing had gotten to a softer part of me, rather than reaching my hand first. It took me a long time to accept that I would never know what it was. I talked to a couple of very good marine biologists over the next few weeks, who had never heard of anything like it. One of them took a bunch of samples from the first body and found some DNA. The best she could tell me was that it was from some organism distantly related to a polychaete worm. Although no similar DNA had been documented, one of her only insights was that the creature most likely washed up because of the storm, which was the worst we've ever had. That was little comfort to me, because these once-in-a-lifetime storms are only getting more common. I asked her how I could find out what it was, what the next steps were. Her answer stuck with me. We don't know half of what lives in the ocean, not even close. If it's something we've never seen before, I can't tell you how to find it. We'll probably never know what it was. I'm sorry. So, my mom just died. Well, not just, but like a month ago. And these past few hours, my life has completely unraveled. She went out for a walk, and according to a doctor I talked to at the hospital, she experienced something called an aneurysm, fell down, and was effectively dead before she even hit the ground. There was no pain, no fear, nothing people told me, but now, I'm not 100% sure I'm okay with that. But let me start at the beginning. I had a happy childhood. All in all, loving parents, friends, everything. But something changed when I was 17. I was in a small accident, nothing too major, but I ended up in the hospital, where I found out that my blood type didn't match either of my supposed parents. Like, completely different. Both of them have B. I have AB, which means they can't be my biological parents. The realization hit me. And while I tried to rationalize it, I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. Mom noticed immediately. And after a bit of prodding, I finally confided in her. She was shocked, to say the least. Then admitted that I had been adopted as a young child, but that both she and her husband saw me as nothing but their own miracle. Honestly, I don't think I took it well. At least for a time. I felt this strange distance between us, which made me lash out at them. But Mom and Dad gave me space and time until I came around on my own. They're still my mom and dad after all, right? Things returned to normal, at least. For a while, school was a great distraction, as were my hobbies, but slowly. I began questioning everything about myself. How much of what I liked was influenced by my adoptive parents. Who was I, after all? If my bio mom hadn't wanted me, did that mean I was a mistake? I would have loved to go back to normal with my parents to let things be, but I just couldn't. After a particularly bad week, I asked Mom about the adoption, but she told me that it was a closed one and that my bio mom wanted no contact with me. That almost sent me spiraling completely. I don't know. I blamed myself even though I knew it couldn't be my fault. But it really felt like everything around me was crumbling. Mom tried to calm me down, but I just couldn't let it go. I cried and begged her for more information, but every time I brought it up, she tried to change the topic ... at night when I couldn't sleep. I heard my parents arguing in their bedroom, hushed voices, sometimes crying as well, ... We were breaking apart. I thought, and I think Mom felt it too. A bit over a week after the first outburst, she and Dad sat me down and filled in the gaps as best they could. I asked about which agency had facilitated the adoption. There was none ... no ... according to Mom. Their finding me was a gift from God. They had always wanted to have children, but it just wasn't meant to be fertility problems and the like ... They visited every doctor they could find until one day, one of them took her aside and straight up told her that giving birth wasn't in the cards for her. The news destroyed her and Dad. Then, not even a month later, while she was out shopping in a city an hour from here, she met a homeless woman, addicted to drugs and obviously unable to take care of herself. She was out begging with a baby in her arms, and that sight broke my mom's heart again. Wanting to help her, she offered her money and a place to stay, but it was clear to her that the woman wouldn't manage it all on her own, ... so she made a deal with her. She would support her in getting clean, and while she was in rehab, my now mom and dad would take care of me. Apparently, the woman did get better, at least a bit, but as she saw how great mom and dad were with me and how much healthier and happier I looked, she didn't have it in her to take me back. She saw that they could provide a life for me. She never could. So she asked my parents to take care of me and bid them farewell, making them promise to keep her existence a secret from me. Since she felt too much shame to ever face me, ... My mom was crying at that point, hugging me and apologizing over and over. And I simply broke down. I was relieved, to be honest. My bio mom had loved me, even more than I could have imagined. She'd given me up to save me ... We hugged and cried for hours. And for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged again. Well, ... when Mom died and I came back for the funeral, I found my dad in a bad state. He was drinking, something he had never done before, and I extended my stay to help him through the difficult times. It was hard seeing him like this, barely. Dressed, unshaven, stashing alcohol around the house. It was pitiful. And I thought I should do something to cheer him up. I told him that I wanted to find my own mom to tell her about the amazing woman she had left me with, how much my life had changed, and how great it had been because my mom was there for not just her, but me as well. Dad scoffed, and I felt this strange gnawing feeling in my chest as I heard him . It wasn't a noise I had expected. Not one somebody would make if they simply didn't like an idea ... No, it sounded dismissive. Disgusted ... I asked him why. But he pulled back and just took another big sip straight from the bottle of vodka . I really couldn't let go. I asked him what Mom up in heaven would think of the way he was behaving right now, and he laughed, then cried, then sank to the floor. We're all going to hell anyway. He mumbled as I pulled the bottle from his grasp and helped him to the couch. He was saying other stuff, but his speech was so slurred, I couldn't really make out what. He was trying to say what I definitely heard was the name of the city, the one Mom had visited when she had met the homeless woman. This strange feeling came over me, maybe I should have just stopped there, let sleeping dogs lie, but I couldn't. I made sure Dad was resting on the couch with a bucket next to him and a glass of water on the table, then headed up to my old room where my laptop stood. It took me 2 hours before I found something. I had to go through hundreds of pages and search prompts, year by year, month by month, until I stumbled upon website someone had put up 17 years ago. The first thing I saw was a giant picture of a baby. Have you seen me? In bold letters underneath. Then a family picture. A mom, a dad, and the same baby. Happy, smiling. Next is a video. It's of a woman begging, with tears in her eyes, to give her back her little baby boy. I've watched it a few times, and every time my heart wants to break. She's begging, pleading, and even bargaining. I guess no one ever helped her. Below. There's her story in another video. The first time I read it, I thought I might throw up. The woman was out with her husband, shopping, when her baby started crying, not wanting to bother the other customers. The father took the baby to walk around the parking lot and calm him down, while the mother stayed inside the shop, This is where the video starts. You can see the parking lot. And the man holding a screaming baby slowly walking past the row of cars. The whole scene looks so normal. So calm Dot at least until a new woman appears. She has darker hair, her head is pointed away from the camera, and she abruptly stops and stares at the man with the baby. Dot. My heart sank as I saw it. The way she moved was so familiar. Suddenly, she starts speeding up her steps, and the man sees her. But he doesn't react at all. Dot. He just smiles and tries to say something. But the woman completely ignores him. I don't think he realized what was about to happen. Not until it was too late. She runs the last few steps as if she wants to tackle him, then reaches out as the man lets out a shriek. You can see her hands grabbing hold of the baby as the man struggles. Then she kicks him and rips the child out of his hands. There's pandemonium. The man reaches out, grabs her coat, and suddenly the woman starts screaming, "Help! Help! People are looking over at them. He wants to steal my baby." The man, kneeling and holding on to her, looks up at her, and for a moment, you can see the woman's face from the side. I threw up Dot the voice, the face ... it, single quotes, this mom Dot. She kicks him again as people race toward them and tackle the man to the ground. Now he's screaming too. But 3 guys are holding him down and punching him, while the woman with the baby runs away. The video cuts out there. It took the real mother of the child to come out for people to realize what had happened. But the other woman had already disappeared. The creator of the page writes about how the police have been useless and plastered that single still image of the side of the woman's face all over the website, begging people to help her find either the woman or the baby. There's one last video, a short plea by the mother directed at the dark-haired woman I called. "Mom for 17 years. Please give him back or let me know he's okay." I had to stop for an hour, then looked through the website to find my real mother's name, Mary and she had a blog linked to the site, and reading it broke me. The despair, the loneliness, the shame. Her husband, my real father, killed himself 2 years after my disappearance. He blamed himself, and I guess he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. My real mother kept going on her own for 15 years. She kept looking and kept the site alive. Posting it and linking to it wherever she could. There are hundreds of links to it, but none of them helped. Half a year ago, she posted one last message: "I can't do this anymore. I am sorry, to my husband. I failed you, to my child. If you should ever read this, I am so sorry, to the woman who took you." Let me say this: I hope hell exists and that one day I will find you there. There is no justice in this world. Her obituary is 4 months old at this point. She gave up. What do I do now? My parents are dead, killed by grief and hopelessness. The one who's ultimately responsible died as well, peacefully. Only one person left is sleeping drunk off his ass on the couch downstairs. What do I do? I don't know where else to turn. I can't talk to my mom about this. She's already a wreck. I can't talk to my dad because, well, he's the reason I'm writing this. I did something, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving him, but now the house is filled with a silence that is so much worse than the screaming I wish I could hear. And I see the look in my father's eyes, and I know I've made a terrible, terrible mistake. I need help. I need someone to tell. I need to do. We live in a nice house. The kind of place people move to when they want a family. A big yard, a picket fence, flower beds my mom fusses over. It was a normal, happy place to grow up. Until the tree died. All started about 15 years ago. I was 10. My dad came home from work one day, absolutely buzzing with an energy I'd rarely seen. He was a quiet man, a decent man, worked a steady job in logistics, and his passions were small and manageable. He loved gardening. It was his escape. On this day, he was holding a small, wrinkled paper bag. "Look at this," he said, his eyes shining as he showed me a single, gnarled black seed. It was the size of a pigeon's egg, strangely heavy, and covered in faint spiral patterns. Got it from a street vendor downtown. An old fella. Said it was special. Said it would grow into a great tree a king in our yard. Said it would cast its shadow over the whole house and protect us. I was 10. I thought it was cool. My dad was a sane, rational man, but he always got a bit poetic when he talked about his garden. I just figured he was exaggerating to make his only kid excited. We planted it together in the center of the backyard. It was a good memory. One of the last purely good ones, I think. The tree grew, and it grew fast. Faster than any tree has a right to grow. Within a couple of years, it was already taller than me. My dad was ecstatic. He tended to it like it was some kind of deity. He built a small, neat wooden fence around its base, not to keep animals out, but it seemed to designate its space as sacred. No one else was allowed to water it. No one else was allowed to prune it, not that it ever seemed to need it. It was his. For years, my mom and I just accepted it. It was Dad's hobby, his thing, when he was out in the yard, kneeling by the tree. We knew that was his time. We didn't interfere. We didn't think much of it, but the tree kept growing. And as it grew, my dad started to change, subtly, at first. He'd spend more and more time out there. He'd come in for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and a distant, peaceful look on his face. He started talking about the tree not as a plant, but as a presence. The tree is well today, he'd say. It enjoyed the rain. We'd just smile and nod to it by the time I was in my early 20s. The tree was a monster. It was a species none of us recognized. Its bark was a smooth, dark gray, almost black, and its leaves were deep, waxy green that seemed to drink the sunlight. It towered over our 2-story house, casting a vast, profound shadow over the entire backyard for most of the day. And that's when we really started to notice the WRONGNESS dot. The first sign was the other plants. My mom's prize-winning roses, the vegetable patch, the cheerful little flowers she planted every spring. And anything that fell under the tree's shadow for more than a few hours a day would wither and die. The soil beneath it became barren, gray, and hard as rock dot then. The animals. Birds stopped nesting in our yard. The squirrels that used to chase each other across the lawn vanished. Even our family dog, a golden retriever, would refuse to go into the backyard. He'd stand at the back door, whining, his tail tucked between his legs, refusing to set a single paw in the shadow. But the worst change was in my father. His obsession became his entire existence. He quit his job. He said he needed to be home to attend to the tree. He'd spend all day, from sunrise to sunset, sitting on a small bench he built directly under its densest branches. He just sat there. Sometimes we'd see him. From the kitchen window, his head tilted as if he were listening to something. Sometimes his lips would move, and we knew, with a certainty that made us sick, that he was talking to it. Got my mom and I tried to reach him. We pleaded. We begged. "Honey, please," my mom would say, her voice breaking. "Come inside. Eat something. You look so thin." He'd just shake his head, a slow, placid smile on his face. "I'm not hungry. The shadow is enough." So, peaceful here, it comforts me. It can comfort you too, if you just come and sit with me. We never did. There was something about that shadow. It wasn't just a lack of light. It felt cold. It felt heavy. It felt hungry. Standing at the edge of it felt like standing at the shore of a deep, dark ocean. You knew you shouldn't step in. The last weeks were the breaking point. He stopped coming inside at all, except to sleep in his chair in the living room for a few fitful hours. He was wasting away. His skin was pale and waxy. His eyes were sunken, but they held a serene, vacant glow that terrified me more than any. Anger could have. He was being consumed. The tree was eating him alive, and he was letting it. I decided I had to do something. I had to save him. The tree had to go. I waited until night. I watched through the window until he finally, reluctantly, came inside and slumped into his armchair, falling into his usual restless sleep. The house was silent. My mom was asleep upstairs. This was my chance. I grabbed the heavy wood-splitting axe from the garage. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. I stepped out the back door. The yard was bathed in the pale, ethereal light of a full moon. But the ground beneath the tree was a pit of absolute blackness. I stepped into the shadow. The cold was immediate, shocking. It wasn't a natural cold. It was a deep, draining cold that seemed to pull the warmth directly from my bones. I walked to the base of the tree. Its smooth black bark felt strangely slick to the touch. Almost. Like skin. I raised the axe. As the metal head touched the bark, I heard it. A whisper right beside my ear. A voice that was both male and female, old and young. It was a rustle of leaves and a sigh of wind in a voice, all at once. I stumbled back, my heart seizing in my chest. I looked around wildly. The yard was empty. I had to have imagined it. It was the wind. It was my own fear talking back to me. It had to be. I steeled myself, spat on my hands, and swung the axe with all my might. THWOCK. The sound was dull, wet, not the sharp crack of axe on wood I was expecting. It felt like hitting a side of beef. The axe bit deep into the trunk. I wrenched it free, and a dark liquid, black in the moonlight, began to ooze from the gash. I ignored it. I swung again. And again, and again. I fell into a frantic, desperate rhythm, sweat pouring down my face, my muscles screaming. The wet, fleshy thud of the axe, the splatter of the dark sap, the deep, draining cold of the shadow. It was a nightmare. With every swing, the ooze from the gash flowed more freely. The coppery, metallic smell of it filled the air. It was a smell I knew, a smell that had no business being here. It was the smell of blood. I touched the sticky liquid with my fingers, brought them to my nose. It was blood. Thick, dark, real. Blood. Panic, stark and absolute, seized me. I wanted to run. I wanted to drop the axe and flee and never look back. But then I thought of my father, of his vacant, smiling face, of him wasting away on his bench. I couldn't stop. I had to finish it, I screamed, a raw, wordless sound of rage and fear, and I put everything I had into the last few swings. The gash widened, the tree groaned, a deep, shuddering sound that seemed to shake the very ground. And then, with a final tearing shriek of splintering matter, it fell. It crashed into the yard with a ground-shaking boom. Its great branches shattering my mom's empty flower pots. Silence. The shadow was gone. I was panting, leaning on the axe, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My eyes were drawn to the stump, to the place where I had cut it. I pulled the small flashlight from my back pocket and aimed the beam at the wound. The inside of the tree wasn't wood. It was a chaotic, fibrous mass of what looked like dark red muscle and pale, glistening sinew, all woven around a central, horrifying core. Where I had cut the tree in half, I had also cut it in half. Embedded in the center of the trunk, integrated into its very being, was the torso of a human being. I could see the curve of the rib cage, the shape of the spine, the pale, rubbery look of preserved flesh. I had cut it clean through. The dark blood was still pouring from it, soaking into the ground. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind simply stopped. What was this? Who was this? Was this what my father had been talking to? Burn it. The voice came from behind me. It was quiet, raspy, and broken. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. My father was standing at the edge of the patio. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the fallen tree, at the mangled, bleeding stump, and the expression on his face. It was the most profound, gut-wrenching sadness I have ever witnessed. The vacant serenity was gone, replaced by a grief so deep it looked like it had cracked. His very soul. Dad. I whispered, "We have to burn it," he repeated, his voice hollow. "All of it. Now." We worked together in a grim, silent ritual. We hacked the branches and the great trunk into manageable pieces. We dragged them into a pile in the center of the yard. My father moved like an old man, his newfound clarity costing him all his strength. He never once looked at the horrifying thing at the heart of the trunk. We doused the pile in gasoline, and my father threw the match. The fire went up with a roar, a greasy, black smoke that smelled of burning meat and something else, something acrid and deeply wrong. We stood there for hours watching it burn, until the great tree that had dominated our lives was nothing but a pile of glowing embers and a scorched, black circle on the lawn. I thought I had saved him. I thought I had cut out the cancer that was killing him. But I was wrong, Doc. It's been a week. The tree is gone. The shadow is gone. My father, he's inside. He eats what my mom puts in front of him. He sleeps in his own bed. He's physically present, but he's not here. The obsession is gone, but the peace, twisted as it was, is gone too. It's been replaced by a constant humming anxiety. He paces the house. He stares out the window at the empty space in the yard. He jumps at every unexpected sound. He doesn't speak. Not a single word since that night. He just looks at me, sometimes with those haunted, broken eyes. And I feel like I'm the monster. I destroyed the thing that was consuming him. And in doing so, I seem to have destroyed him, too. I traded a smiling zombie for a silent, terrified ghost. What was that thing? What did I do? And how do I fix my dad? Is there any way to bring him back from whatever edge I've pushed him over? Please, if anyone has any idea what happened, dear, tell me. The silence in this house is getting louder every day. I don't know why I'm writing this. I'm not a forum guy. But I'm alone out here and I have to tell someone, anyone, just to get it out of my own head. So if I do go crazy, at least there's a record of it. I torched my life about a month ago. Job, apartment, relationship, the whole thing. I'm an architect, or I was. Had a full-blown burnout, the kind that leaves you feeling hollowed out, you know? I just needed quiet, needed to start over. I found this listing online, a house going for practically nothing. The catch was its location, the middle of nowhere, in a derelict 60s housing development that went bust. The town's name is Ethelberg. Sounded perfect. A place where the world couldn't find me. When I got here, it was even deader than I'd imagined. A ghost town of asphalt and weeds. Perfectly laid out streets that lead nowhere. Rusted streetlights standing like skeletal sentinels. All the houses are identical. These sad little copy-pasted boxes. All of them empty and rotting. Except mine. Mine was clean. Too clean. Like someone had been here a week ago and scrubbed the place down. The first few days were bliss. The silence. I'd forgotten what real silence was. Not city quiet, which is just a low hum. This was a deep, heavy quiet that felt like it was pressing on my eardrums. I started unpacking, slowly. Starting to feel human again. That's when the little things started. The first thing, it was a picture frame. An old photo of my parents. I had put it on the mantelpiece over the brick fireplace. One evening, I'm walking to the kitchen to get a drink. I stop. I pick up the frame and I move it. Maybe 4 inches to the left. The thing is, I don't remember deciding to do it. My hand just did it. Like an autopilot thing, you know? Like when you're driving and you suddenly realize you don't remember the last 5 miles. But I did it after the frame was in its new spot. I felt this wave of calm, relief, like an itch I didn't know I had was finally scratched. I figured, okay, whatever, stress, nerves, it's a new place. I'm just settling in. A few nights later, I woke up, not because of a noise. I just woke up, eyes wide open in the pitch black. I wasn't in my bed, I was standing in the kitchen. The linoleum was ice cold under my feet. It took me a second to figure out where I was. I hadn't turned on the light. The only light was the pale moonlight filtering through the window over the sink. And I saw what I'd done to every can of food I owned. I'd taken every single one out of the pantry. Tuna, corn, beans, soup, all of it. And I'd stacked them, not just in a pile. I'd built a perfect symmetrical pyramid on the countertop. It was flawless. I have no memory of doing this. None. The last thing I remember is reading in bed and turning off the light. And the scariest part, the part that's really messing with my head, is that my first reaction wasn't fear. It was satisfaction. I looked at that pyramid of cans in the dark, and some quiet, calm part of my brain just went, there, that's better. The panic didn't hit until I was back in bed, shivering. Am I sleepwalking? I've never sleepwalked in my life. But maybe stress can trigger it? A new environment? I kept trying to find a logical reason. I had to, because the alternative was just not possible, but it kept happening. It's still happening. I'm not just sleepwalking anymore. I find myself doing things during the day. I'll be in the middle of something and I'll just zone out. I'll come to, and I'll find I've spent the last hour organizing the books on my shelves. Not by author, not by title, by the exact shade of their color, from lightest to darkest. I found myself on my hands and knees in the bathroom, scrubbing the grout between the tiles with a toothbrush until it was pristine white. I don't remember. Starting, I just wake up in the middle of it, my back aching, with that same weird, creepy feeling of a job well done. I'm becoming obsessive. That's the only rational explanation. The isolation is getting to me, triggering some latent OCD I never knew I had. My whole day is consumed by it now. Everything has to be perfect, symmetrical. If a coaster is off-center on the coffee table, it's not just annoying. It feels wrong, physically wrong. I get this knot in my stomach, this rising anxiety that doesn't go away until I fix it. The problem is it's working. The burnout, the anxiety, the reason I came here in the first place, it's gone. It's been replaced by this obsession with order. It's like my brain has traded one illness for another, and the new one is so much quieter, so much calmer. I tried to fight it. I swear I did. 3 days ago I decided, fuck this. I'm not a slave to this. I deliberately messed up the living room. I left a coffee cup on the floor. I tossed a book onto the sofa instead of putting it back on the shelf. I tried to just live in it. 2, be a normal, messy human being. I thought I was going to die. It started with a headache, a dull throb behind my eyes. Then the noise started. A low, deep hum. So low, it was more of a feeling than a sound. It was like the house was vibrating. It made my teeth ache. I lay on my bed for hours, curled up in a ball, sweating, the pressure in my head building and building. I felt like my skull was going to crack open. I couldn't take it. Around dawn, I gave up. I got up, my head pounding, and I cleaned the living room. I put the cup in the sink. I put the book back on the shelf in its correct color-coded spot. I straightened the rug. The second I finished, the instant the room was back in perfect order, it stopped. A headache vanished. The humming cut out. Just silence. And that wave of calm washed over me again. It's not just in my head. It can't be. OCD doesn't give you a physical vibrating hum in your house. It doesn't stop the second you align your books. This is something else. This house, this place. It's not just a building. It's a system. And it has rules. And I'm learning that breaking them has consequences, and then tonight happened. The thing that made me write this, I was in the bathroom, washing my face. I looked up at my reflection in the mirror, and I saw my hand, my right hand. It started to lift. I didn't tell it to. I tried to stop it. I swear to God, I focused all my will on telling my arm to stay down. But it was like it wasn't mine anymore. It was like watching someone else's arm attached to my shoulder. It moved slowly, deliberately, watched, frozen in horror, as my own index finger touched my forehead, and it started to draw. An invisible pattern on my own skin. A spiral with straight lines coming off it, like a stylized sun. I could feel the light pressure of my own nail. I was staring at my own eyes in the mirror, wide with terror, and I couldn't do a single thing to stop it. I was a prisoner in my own body. It probably lasted 10 seconds. It felt like an hour. Then it stopped. My arm dropped to my side. I had control again. I shakily raised my other hand to my forehead. There was nothing there. No mark. No scratch. But I know what happened. I saw it. I felt it. It's not just about the things in the house anymore. It's not about arranging books or cans. It started arranging me. I should leave. I know that. A sane person would be packing a bag right now and driving until the sun came up. But I can't. The thought of leaving this house, of leaving anything out of place, it fills me with a kind of dread that's worse than the fear. The thought of the headache, of the humming, and there's something else. The real reason I'm still here, since this started, since I've been following these rituals, I've been productive. I'm an architect. I design things. I hadn't been able to draw a straight line for 6 months. My creativity was gone, burned out. The other night, after one of the arranging episodes, I sat down at my drafting table. And I started to draw. It just flowed out of me. The lines were perfect. The concepts were clear, brilliant. In a few hours, I designed a structure more elegant and complex than anything I'd managed in my entire career. It was effortless. I wasn't even thinking. I was just the hand holding the pencil. I looked at the finished drawing, and I felt that same familiar feeling, that deep, profound satisfaction. The feeling of perfect order. I think I understand now. This house isn't haunting me. It doesn't want to hurt me, it's fixing me, It's taking all the messy, chaotic, human parts of me, the anxiety, the depression, the unpredictable spark of creativity, and it's cleaning them up. It's sanding them down. It's putting them in order. It's emptying me of the chaos and filling me with purpose, with structure, and that's the part that terrifies me more than anything else. A part of me wants to let it. A part of me is so tired of the mess. I stared up at the entrance to the old hospital, drinking in its features. Cracks spiderwebbed along the bricks, and vines had claimed most of the exterior. It was an oddity against the encroaching forest, a relic of a time long since past. It felt wrong for it to be there, out of place, which only worked to pique my interest even further. So, are we gonna stand here all day, or are we checking this sucker out? Kyle asked, politely slapping me on the back. Let's go. Don't want to lose too much daylight, Maddie interjected, tugging my arm. As you wish. Ladies first, I replied, extending a hand to the door. Maddie rewarded me with a glare. The interior of the hospital was in an even worse state than the outside. Lights had been smashed out, graffiti coated the walls, and pink insulation hung from the ceiling above. As an avid urbex enthusiast, I was reveling in it. Something about being in a place that humans didn't belong always sent. A rush of exhilaration surging through my veins. I lived for the thrill. But after what happened that day, my passion for urban exploring has been snuffed out. We were taking photos of abandoned medical equipment when Kyle brought it up. Hey guys. He spoke in a whisper, despite the fact that we were alone. Yeah, I replied, sensing the tremor in his voice. Does it feel like we're being followed? It might just be me, but something tells me that we're not the only ones here. Stop. You're trying to prank me. And it's not going to work this time. How gullible do you think I am? Maddie retorted, crossing her arms. Maddie, I promise I'm not joking. Her expression faltered when she realized the severity of Kyle's tone. You're really not? Jake? Is he being serious? I sighed. When Maddie got freaked out, it wasn't a good time for anyone. Things had been going smoothly up until that point, and I didn't want to ruin a good thing. Tell you what, Kyle, if we check out a couple more rooms and your sixth sense is still going haywire, we can leave. Sound good? Despite their nods of approval, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was thicker, solid as if I could reach out and touch it. Knowing what I know now, I wish we would have left the moment Kyle said something. We continued our search with no further protest from either party. We photographed our findings in silence, that pervasive unease still omnipresent. I kept trying to find something to say, but I couldn't arrange the words properly in my head. After a while, it was Maddie who broke the silence. So, who's down to find the morgue? She said as a devilish grin inched across her lips. Kyle and I shot each other a glance. Neither of us wanted to go, but we didn't really have a choice. If we refused, Maddie would call us cowards until the day we died. Sure, let's do it, Kyle said. He tried to sound confident, but he and I both knew the truth. Alright. But after that, we're leaving. My friends each nodded, and with that, we set off to find the hospital's morgue. God, it only took us about 10 minutes. As we walked, I tried to discern if I could feel the eyes watching our every move like Kyle had described. At one point, I thought I did feel it. An intense, overwhelming sensation that we weren't alone. I found myself throwing glances behind us every so often, but I didn't voice my concerns, a decision that I regret to this day. Before I knew it, I found myself descending the stairs to the basement. Our flashlight beams danced along the staircase as we went, shedding light into the inky depths below. Once we reached the bottom, there was a long hallway with a set of double doors at the end. Spooky, isn't it? Maddie whispered as we continued. Yeah, feels ominous, I said as a shiver rippled through me. The air was colder down there, lending to the creepy ambiance. We paused once we reached the doors. Okay, who wants to go first? Maddie asked, surveying our expressions. I think you should. You suggested it, Kyle retorted, wearing a shit-eating grin. Yep, as I said before, ladies first. I joined in, earning me another glare. Fine, but if I die, I'm going to come back just to take you with me. Maddie pushed open doors and led the charge, Kyle and I following behind her. Standing in that room sent a chill down my spine. Kyle turned to me, that taunting smirk returning to his lips, and he whispered into my ear, let's prank Maddie. You distract her. Meanwhile, I'll climb into one of the freezer racks and make a bunch of noise in there. I bet she'll scream, loud enough to wake the dead. I smiled at him. Maddie was never going to forgive us for this. One problem. I muttered, how are you going to close yourself in? I'll figure it out. Just a nice try, dickheads. I can hear you. Maddie glowered at us like we were the spawns of Satan. My face flushed with color, and sweat beaded atop my brow. Yeah, we weren't actually going to go through with it. Just an idea, Kyle said, rubbing the back of his neck. She wasn't buying it. Bang! A sudden rattling sound erupted from one of the mortuary chambers that Kyle had centered his plot around. It started off quiet, small enough to be dismissed as nothing more than the groan of old metal. But it soon escalated to a loud clanging. We stared at each other, wide-eyed, our faces pale as ghosts. The sound had grown into a deafening pounding. Something was being slammed hard against the inside of the door. It was clear that Kyle's earlier premonition had been spot on. We were not alone in that hospital dot. We stood, frozen in shock, left to helplessly watch as the door buckled under. The weight of the blows, over and over and over again. Bang dot, bang dot, bang dot, bang dot, to my utter horror. The door gave way. For a moment it was silent, the dented metal creaking, barely clinging to its hinges. Then something began crawling out of the unit. Something sinister. A pair of feet emerged from the darkness. The skin was a dark purple, and stitching around the ankles was barely holding together. A dirty, blood-stained hospital gown followed, then a twin set of patchwork arms. Finally, the thing's head shot out of the dark as it hoisted itself off. Of the freezer rack, that face will haunt me for the rest of my life. Stitches pieced its mottled skin together, roughly hewn flesh sallow and raw. Its smile was crooked, too many teeth fighting for space in that twisted grin, and its eyes. They were completely black, devoid of life, devoid of a soul. Kyle suddenly grabbed my arm, hard. He ran without a word, Maddie in tow. That gave me the resolve. I needed to follow them. The three of us bolted down the hallway, desperate to get away from whatever we had awoken. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I realized that we were being chased. The sound of bare feet slapping against the tile fueled my legs to work harder than they ever had before. Once we reached the stairs, I bounded up them three at a time, bolting for the exit the second I reached the top. The thing had been gaining on us in the basement, but once we reached the main landing, I couldn't hear those wet, awkward clops pursuing us any longer. Even so, I didn't let that stop me. I kept running, never once looking back until I burst out the front doors, unlocked my car, and threw myself into the driver's seat. Only then did I allow myself to catch my breath. A second later, Kyle threw open the passenger side door, dove in, and slammed down the lock. He turned to me, his face pale and soaked in sweat. Still trying to catch his breath, he managed to croak out the words that still haunt me to this day. "Jake, where's Maddie?" My heart plummeted into my chest. "She wasn't there. Should we go back?" I asked, a cold dread blanketing me at the thought. The two of us sat there, staring out the windshield, praying that somehow our friend would explode out of those doors and join us. But that didn't happen. We sat there for longer than I'd like to admit, completely silent, desperately grasping for a solution. Eventually, we called the cops. The police searched the entire hospital and combed the surrounding woods, but they didn't find any trace of Maddie or the man who had chased us. Aside from the texts agreeing to meet that day, there was no evidence that Maddie had even been there in the first place. It was as if she simply poofed out of existence. But Kyle and I knew what really happened. We had abandoned her down there with that monstrosity. We'd put our own safety over hers. We were the reason that she was missing, and we had to live. With that, Kyle and I drifted apart in the weeks that followed. Maddie still hadn't been found, and I think the weight of what we'd been through was too heavy for us to come to terms with. When I look at Kyle, the crushing reminder of what we'd done, or more aptly, what we'd failed to do, would come flooding back. It eventually reached the point where we would only sporadically check in on one another. That is, until he sent me a strange text one afternoon. "Hey man, I need to talk to you. Not over the phone, face to face. Meet me by the pond in the park at 8 tonight." The message caught me off guard. Whatever it was that Kyle needed to tell me, it sounded urgent. As I would come to find out, I found Kyle sitting on a park bench by the pond. It wasn't completely dark yet, but the sun was dipping below the horizon. As I claimed my spot beside him, I noted that he was staring off into the distance. His hair was disheveled, and it appeared as if he hadn't slept in days. "Kyle, are you okay? You look like you've been through the ringer." He turned to me, his bloodshot eyes connecting with mine. "Jake, I'm not okay. I don't think I'll ever be okay again, man. I can't take it." He was getting choked up, and tears began to well in the corners of his eyes. "No, you can't think like that. Everything's going to be alright. If this is about Maddie, Kyle turned to me, the stone-cold look in his gaze deterring me from finishing my sentence. "You haven't been seeing her, have you? So it's only me." Fuck. I'm screwed, man. It's over. She's going to come from me, then she used me to get you. And I grabbed Kyle's shoulders and shook him. He was raving like a lunatic, an asylum patient off his meds. Snap out of it. "What are you rambling about?" "Seeing Maddie." "What does that mean?" Kyle looked at me with a cold stare. His wild hair fluttered in the wind as an ominous breeze swept through. This is going to sound insane, but Maddie has been visiting me, or what's left of her. Her mouth is stitched shut. Her hair is soaked in blood, and now she's wearing one of those hospital gowns. It got her. She's not alive anymore, Jake. That thing from the hospital, it's using her to get me. And once it does, you'll be next. I couldn't formulate response. I stared at him, mouth agape, turning over his words in my mind. Could what he had just told me even be possible? That's it. That's all I need to tell you. Well, and I guess I wanted to say goodbye. I doubt I'll make it much longer. Jake, I'm so scared. Tears openly streamed down his face, and my first instinct was to pull him into a hug. He sobbed while I tried to console him, failing to subdue the tremors that racked his frame. Look, it's going to work out. Trust me, you are not going to die. I'll think of a way out of this. We both knew that my words were hollow, yet it felt better than saying nothing at all. Kyle pulled away and wiped his eyes, that foreign look from when I'd first seen him returning to his face. Jake, I really hope you're right, for both of our sakes. Asterisk. I called Kyle's mom that night and voiced my concerns. Her son was spiraling, and whether it was due to some entity gunning for his soul or some kind of vivid hallucination, I was determined to get him some help. but my efforts were all in vain. Kyle's body was found 2 days later. He'd eaten a slug from a 12 gauge. The neighbors claimed that they heard screaming, hysterical wails like Kyle was trying to get away from someone or something. And then they reported hearing multiple gunshots, followed by an unnerving silence. No one saw anyone enter or exit the home. Leaving all of the witnesses perplexed, Got the News painted him like a man with a rampant mental condition. A loon who let his untreated delusions frighten him into making the worst decision possible. But I know that what Kyle saw was real, because lately, I've been seeing her too. She appeared for the first time the night that Kyle died, standing below a street lamp across from my window. His description of her had been deadly accurate. Maddie's eyes were stitched shut, and her arms hung limply by her sides. Her hair glistened with something dark, and the hospital gown she wore had yellow stains blotched across the front. But her smile, there was something sinister behind it. Something evil pulling the strings, and I'm afraid that I'm going to find out what that thing is firsthand. 3 days have passed since then. I've started seeing Kyle too. The two of them have been moving progressively closer with each passing day. Last night, they were in my room. They just stared at me, smirking, taunting me, Maddie with her unseeing eyes and grin with too many teeth. Kyle with what was left of his reconstructed face. Flesh and bone melded together to form something vaguely human. Now, I realize that they came to deliver a message. My doomsday clock is ticking down and I only have a few hours left, because when I awoke this morning, splattered across my bedroom wall in a deep crimson were the words, "Tonight your soul belongs to me." I don't know what I'm doing posting this to a damn internet forum, but I need to get it out somehow. Maybe writing it all down and posting it online will help. I doubt it, but it's worth a shot. Here goes nothing. My name's Daniel Mathis. I used to be a detective, but I retired 2 months back. Well, maybe retired isn't the right word. Forced to quit is more like it. Either way, I'm not on the force anymore. That's enough about me, though. If I'm going to tell this story properly, then I need to start at the beginning. The very beginning, doubt it started 20 years ago. A child went missing. A little boy, only 10 years old. His name was Johnny. I'd worked on a few missing person cases before, but this one was different. Johnny was walking back from school with some of his friends. It was getting dark, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. His friends were too scared to follow, so Johnny went alone. Needless to say, he never made it home. His parents reported him missing a few hours later. We searched the area for days. We questioned every sex offender in a 15-mile radius. Hell, we combed through every inch of that damn forest, but we never found him. Whoever took Johnny was smart about how they did it. They knew how to cover their tracks. It was almost like the kid vanished into thin air. Flash forward a month to mid-January, and I'm knocking on his parents' front door. It was snowing that day. I remember Paul, the kid's father, answered the door. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Despite this, he still made an effort to be polite. He gave me a weary smile and shook my hand. "Detective Mathis." "Come in," he said. "My wife's in the living room." His wife, Erin, was sitting with her back to me, staring at the TV. On the screen was a recording of Johnny, taken a couple months before he disappeared. It was grainy and blurry, the way home videos are. He had bright orange hair, freckles, and green eyes, just like his mother. In the video, he was dressed in a puffy jacket and playing around in a pile of leaves. It must have been taken in there. "Front yard. Mommy, mommy, watch this," he yelled, getting a running start before leaping head first into the pile of leaves. He burst out a few seconds later, stray foliage clinging to his hair. "Wow, sweetie," Erin's voice said from behind the camera. Johnny flashed a beaming smile, showing off the gap between his front teeth before preparing to jump into the leaves once again. I stood in the doorway to the living room, watching the video unfold. Once it reached its end, Erin started it from the beginning. It was only a few seconds long. She gazed into the TV, rubbing her necklace with her thumb, silently whispering along. "Dear, Paul said, shaking her from her trance. Detective Mathis is here. Aaron looked over and paused the video. Please take a seat, Paul said, gesturing to a chair. Both he and Aaron sat on the couch across from me, his hand holding hers as. I started to speak. Mr. and Mrs. McLean, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that is not good news. We have to call off the search for Johnny. Aaron broke down immediately, sobbing into her hands. Paul squeezed his eyes shut, trying to stop himself from doing the same. To be honest, I felt like crying as well. I fought to keep it going for as long as I possibly could. But, well, Johnny's been missing for a month now, and we've run out of leads. We're going to keep the case open, but until any new evidence comes to light, well, there's nothing we can do. The living room was filled with the sound of Aaron's wails. Paul tried his best to comfort her, but he was barely keeping it together himself. You promised, Aaron started to shout. You promised you would bring him home? Mrs. McLean, why can't you bring him home? She screamed. She rose to her feet and stormed upstairs, leaving Paul and I alone in the living room. I'm sorry. I really am, I muttered, unable to look him in the eye. Paul wiped the tears away from his face before rising to his feet. I think you should leave. I looked up at him, opening my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I simply nodded my head and rose to my feet. Paul was barely fighting back his tears as I left. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear him break down and start to sob. Paul and Aaron both died 15 years later. Paul started drinking and never stopped. Aaron drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the night and drowned. I don't think they ever forgave me. Not really. To them, I was always the detective that failed to bring their child home. It was the 20th anniversary of the kid's disappearance. December 5th, when I came home to a letter. It had no return address or any distinguishing features. It was just a plain white envelope. There was no way it could have been delivered by a mailman. Someone dropped it off personally. I still have it somewhere, but I don't need to read it again to remember what it said. The words are branded into my brain like a hot iron. I sat at my dining room table, cut the envelope open, and started to read, Dear Detective Mathis. If things were different, I would have written this letter to Johnny's parents. I regret that. I never got the opportunity to explain this to them. I know they never would have been able to understand, but I would have liked to explain it regardless. Enough about that though. With them gone, I have decided that the only one worthy of my confession is you. I watched you search for me, I watched your interviews on the news. I watched as every lead you had went cold. In fact, I've seen you in person. You wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another face in the grocery store or on the street. But I noticed you. I always noticed you, Detective Mathis. I am sure you have figured it out by now. But I am the one who took Johnny. I am the one who snatched him away in the woods 20 years ago. I still remember how I lured him into my car. I remember how I knocked him unconscious. I remember how much I was shaking. I want you to know that I never touched him. Not like that, anyway. I want that to be known. On the back of this letter are coordinates. Follow them, and more will be revealed. And if you tell the police about this, you will be throwing away your only chance to do right by Johnny. No more mysteries. No more games. It's time you learned why I did what I did. I sat there reading and rereading that letter for what felt like hours. There were two possibilities. Either the person who took Johnny 20 years ago really had sent Emmy a letter confessing his guilt, or someone was messing with me, and I did not know which was worse. I flipped the letter over and looked at the coordinates. Careful not to touch the paper too much. If this really was written by the person who took Johnny, I wanted to preserve the prints. Staring at the coordinates, my first instinct was to call the station. But then another thought came into my mind. I knew that if I showed up with other cops and the guy who took Johnny was there, he'd just get arrested. If I went by myself, I knew I could give him what he really deserved. No witnesses, no one could stop me from putting a bullet in his head. Besides, I could have just said it was self-defense. This man put Johnny's parents through hell. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to put him in the ground. I took a picture of the coordinates and plugged them into Google Maps. It was about a 30-minute drive, located deep in woods outside of town. I threw on my coat, grabbed my gun, and raced out to my car. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over with how fast I was going. As I sped down the interstate, the leather on my steering wheel creaked beneath my grip. My knuckles turned white and I caught myself grinding my teeth together. I thought about what the letter said, how he bragged about seeing me in public, how many times had I walked past this guy, how many times had I passed by someone on the street corner and that someone was him. I wasn't a cop at this point. I didn't have my badge or my lights on. I was just angry and ready to kill a man. Eventually I turned onto an old dirt road. I followed the directions until I came upon a trail into the woods. Parking the car, I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and stepped out. God, it was twilight. And the forest was quiet, blanketed beneath a thick layer of snow. Not even the birds were making a sound. It was that kind of silence you only find in the dead of winter dot. As I trudged through the woods, I only became more furious. I imagined what it must have been like when Johnny was brought here. A million questions raced through my mind. Was he unconscious as he was dragged through the snow? Was he even alive? Did he leave a trail of blood? Or was he wrapped tightly in a garbage bag? The coordinates took me off the trail and deep into the woods. I didn't even consider if I was going to be able to find my way back. I only had one thing on my mind. Finally, I reached the coordinates. Only to find nothing. It was just a small clearing. Snow-covered ground, bare trees, and the dark sky hanging above. I shined my flashlight around, desperately searching for something, anything. I double-checked my phone to make sure I was at the right spot. I was. Stumbling over to a dead log laying up against a small hill, I sat down. I buried my face in my hands and wiped away a few tears as my breath disappeared into clouds of vapor. The snow came up to my ankles, and the cold seeped through my boots. I slammed my fist down onto the decaying wood. I did it again. Then again. I shot to my feet and spun around, screaming into the empty forest as I furiously stomped down on the log. The dry wood splintered and cracked beneath my boot as I yelled every profanity I could think of. After what must have been my 10th kick, my foot broke through the hollow log and slammed into something behind it. Something metal. I stumbled back, my foot throbbing in pain, shining my light through the newly formed hole in the log. I saw a rusted metal surface hiding beneath it. I frantically rolled the log aside, the wood breaking apart as I revealed what was underneath. Brushing the snow aside, I realized that what I was staring at was the entrance to a bunker. My breathing was heavy as I tugged on the latch. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The heavy door groaned as I swung it open. I was greeted with stone, steps leading down into the dark. Shining my light, I saw just how deep this bunker was. It must have gone down 10 or 15 feet before the steps finally stopped and gave way to an unlit hallway. Drawing my gun, I took a deep breath and started down the steps, leaving a trail of snow and mud behind me. I reached the bottom of the stairs and shined my light down the hallway. At the end of the hall was a large metal door. My own breath was deafening as I approached. Against the wall, next to the door, was a dial. Holding my flashlight in the crook of my neck, I turned it. I flinched as some sort of intercom screeched, blaring an old and grainy rendition of When Johnny Comes Marching. Home. It began with deafening drums and an ear-piercing whistle before giving way to a cacophony of voices. When Johnny come marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. Stuffing my gun into my holster, I clasped my hands over my ears as the sound of an entire choir echoed throughout the bunker. We'll give him a hearty welcome, then hurrah, hurrah. Pushing the metal door open, I stumbled into the room beyond and frantically looked for the source of the music. The men will cheer. The boys will shout. The ladies, they will all turn out. And we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. At the far end of the room was a computer with multiple monitors, one of which was hooked up to a loudspeaker, and it will all feel gay when Johnny comes marching. AI grabbed the wire and ripped it out of the speaker, abruptly stopping the music. With the song no longer playing, I looked around to get a feel for my surroundings. I was in a concrete room with low ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. It looked like an old hospital ward. The counters were populated by scalpels, operating, tools of various sizes, and syringes. In the center of the room was an operating table adorned with leather straps. The whole room smelled like rubbing alcohol. The lights in the ceiling did a poor job at illuminating things, making the whole bunker feel claustrophobic and suffocating. The wall on the left was like something you would see in a mystery film. Hundreds of pieces of paper pinned to a notice board. Some of them had notes furiously scribbled down in handwriting I could barely decipher. Others, however, looked like printed off images of star systems. A picture of the Milky Way hung next to an old newspaper clipping from 20 years ago that read, "Strange lights spotted in the night sky." The wall opposite of that was, in fact, not a wall, but rather a glass divider, separating this section of the room from whatever was beyond it. Behind the glass was a thick blue mist, so dense that I couldn't even begin to see what was on the other side. "Johnny, are you here?" I shouted, running up to the glass and trying to peer through. Stepping back, I looked around the room in search of something to break the glass. That's when I saw it. On one of the computer screens was a recording titled 4, Mathis. Approaching the screen, I moved the mouse over it and clicked play. "Hello, Detective Mathis." My grip on my gun tightened when I finally heard his voice. For 20 years, I had imagined what this monster sounded like. Finally hearing. It felt surreal. The voice was slightly garbled by a modulator, but I could still tell that he was around my age. Mid-60s at most. If you're listening to this, then you read my letter. If you were hoping to arrest me, or maybe even kill me, I am sorry to disappoint you. I have taken exhaustive steps to cover my tracks. Even if you manage to find my identity, I will be long gone by then. I clenched my jaw, imagining how satisfying it would feel to choke him out. I am sure you have many questions, and I think that this recording will answer most of them, but before I can explain anything, I think it is best to introduce you to someone. With that, the chamber behind the glass divider began to hiss. The fog quickly dissipated, and the room beyond was revealed. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw when the mist fully cleared. I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, every time I fall asleep, I see that thing. On the other side of the glass, there was I don't even know what to call it. It looked vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were more akin to an arachnid. Countless fingers with numerous joints sprawled forth from its palms like a spider web. Its skin was brown and covered in a thick layer of slime that dripped down onto the floor. Its emaciated torso was hollow, its ribs curling outward to form a central cavity that bellowed slightly as the thing quietly breathed. Detective Mathis. Said the recording, "Meet the Basilisk." Whether that is its true name or simply what it has chosen to be called is beyond me. As my eyes traveled over the creature's horribly misshapen and grotesque form, I saw something that made my heart sink into my stomach, encased within its open ribcage was a body. It was small, frail, and wrapped in a cocoon of sinew. It dripped with the strange fluid, and parts of its discolored skin seemed to be merging with the creature itself. Taking a step towards the glass, I let out a quiet gasp when I saw the strands of orange hair hanging from its scalp. "Johnny?" I whispered Dot to my horror. One of his green eyes fluttered open, his irises bloodshot. He looked at me for a split second before his pupil rolled back into his head and he started to thrash about. He was alive. He was fucking alive? Through the glass, I could hear horrible, excruciating groans. I pray I never have to hear anything like that again. They reverberated off the walls of the bunker, the choked sobs of a child. A child crying not because he is sad or because he needs attention, but because he is in pain. I pressed my hand against the glass and fought back tears as I watched Johnny, the boy I thought had been dead for 20 years, writhe in agony before my eyes. Suddenly, his screams were overpowered by a low groan. A strange clicking noise filled the room as the many elongated fingers of the basilisk began to twitch. After a few seconds, Johnny's muffled screams were silenced. His eye fluttered shut, and he went still. As he stopped moving, so did the basilisk. "Johnny? Johnny!" I screamed, pounding on the glass. Neither he nor the creature responded. Incredible, isn't it? The recording spoke again. The basilisk came to me 20 years ago. Its spacecraft descended from the stars before my very eyes. I was barely listening to the recording at this point. My eyes were fixated on Johnny as he lay motionless inside the creature's chest. Do you want to know the interesting part? Detective Mathis? When it came to me, I was a dying man. Brain cancer. Stage 4, inoperable. His voice seemed sullen before perking up as he continued. The basilisk cured me. I should have died years ago, but it halted my tumor in its tracks. I began to look around the room, searching for some way into the chamber, but I found nothing. Johnny was completely sealed off. Can you see it? The fluid that it is secreting? In that fluid lays the cure to cancer. Can you imagine a world where we do not have to fear such a horrid fate? The enzymes in that fluid were the key. I knew that if I could isolate them, learn how to replicate it, I could make cancer a thing of the past. And the basilisk was willing to help me. The voice paused for a second, and I could hear the man let out a sigh, except it needed something from me. It wanted a child. I've replayed that part in my head more times than I care to admit. It never fails to make me sick. The basilisk is a creature of the abstract. It feeds off futures that never were. And there is no one who has more potential or imagination for the future as a child. Johnny is alive in there. The basilisk is keeping him alive, keeping his psyche trapped in the body of a child, dreaming of the future he never had. I know your first instinct will probably be to try and pull him out, but that won't save him. The basilisk has been feeding off of Johnny for 20 years. They are merged in body and mind. If you separate them, they both will die. I started to cry. I stumbled back and leaned against the operating table. Unable to peel my eyes away from the glass, the voice sighed deeply. I know you think I am a monster, Detective Mathis, but I stand by what I've done. Do you know why? He sounded so arrogant, so damn smug, because I figured out how to replicate the enzymes. In a few years, I will have a cure to every type of cancer there is. Do you know how many children die of cancer every year? Nearly 100,000. Nearly 2 million children have died in agony since I first took Johnny, since I gave him to the basilisk. I had to do this. I have a duty to save as many as I can, and the basilisk never would have helped me if I hadn't given it a child. I sacrificed one so I could save millions. No matter how hard I tried, I could not look away from the display on the other side of the glass for more than a few seconds. The otherworldly, incomprehensibly twisted form of the basilisk. Johnny's nearly unrecognizable body, trapped within. If I had gone to the government, the voice began again, they would have locked it away beneath the Pentagon. They would have tortured it, and if they ever realized the good it could do, they would have only given it to the rich. The 1%, the corrupt, the greedy, and the perverted. I could hear the anger and bitterness in his voice. I'm going to give this cure to everyone, not just the wealthy. Soon, cancer will be a distant memory. Johnny has made a necessary sacrifice. His suffering has led to an unprecedented leap in medicine. As the recording continued, I approached the glass, looking at the emaciated husk huddled within the chest cavity. His eye opened again, only for a second. It looked around the room, seeming to follow the web of fingers clinging to the ceiling. In the seconds before he shut his eye again, I could see Johnny's pain, his fear. Now, the recording continued. The way I see it, you have a few options. You could call your precinct, but that would be foolish. If you show them the basilisk, the CIA won't be far behind. If they don't kill you, they will brainwash you into never speaking of this again. They will take both the basilisk and Johnny away for study. He will remain in his living hell, and it will be your fault. I looked down at the gun in my hand, running my thumb over the black metal. Your second option is to kill them, the recording said, even though I knew they were coming. I felt my heart sink into my stomach as he said those words. I trust you brought your gun. The glass is not bulletproof, and neither is the basilisk. Just a few shots is all it should take. I am no fool. I know that if the basilisk is left unattended, it will eventually leave the bunker and begin searching for other children. Just like any junkie, the high will wear off and it will search for the next one. I could not bring myself to end its life. I worked with it for many years. It is practically my colleague. For the first time since the recording began, I detected a hint of compassion in his voice. So, it is up to you, Detective Mathis. You can put Johnny out of his misery and walk away. You can be satisfied knowing that you ended his suffering the only way you could. Alternatively, you could notify the government. You could risk your own life and doom Johnny to who knows how many more years of agony. You are a pragmatic man, much like myself. I trust you will make the correct decision. And with that, the recording was over. I was left in the bunker with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the horrible abomination on the other side of the glass. Looking up from my gun, I saw Johnny staring at me, not with one eye, but both. Tears trickled down his cheeks. As he gazed at me, his eyes pleading for something. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm not even sure if he was still capable of thought after 20 years of torment. After a few seconds, the basilisk fingers twitched again, and Johnny was pulled back into his slumber. I looked down at my gun again, thought my hand was trembling. A few minutes later, I stepped out of the bunker and into the cold night. The chill nipped at my skin, and the barrel of my gun was still smoking. A light snow began to fall as I sat down on a hollow log. I began to sob. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears kept coming. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I cried Dot as I wept. I felt my gun's weight in my hand, 2 bullets lighter than when I had arrived. Despite its fresh paint and polished mosaics, the house felt lived in from the moment I stepped inside. It smelled of plastered dust, sharp and clean. But beneath it clung something older, warmth soaked into the wood, as though the walls remembered. Meals and laughter. Odd, for a place so recently renovated, a fact the realtor had repeated almost to the point of insistence. I told myself I needed that renewal. The move wasn't about square footage or mortgage rates so much as distance. From the old job, the hostile boss, the endless small office wars. The new position promised steadiness, a manager who listened, colleagues who minded their own work. A clean start, and this house was meant to be the reward. The kitchen drew me first, counter stiff beneath my hands, hinges creaking as if relaring. Motion, the fridge humming in steady breath. Morning light cut through the high window and fractured on the island, spreading across the floor in the shape of a 7-pointed star. I stood there that first morning, coffee cooling in my hand, and thought, it's a lucky house. Everywhere I walked, the house seemed to move with me. The third stair lifted its note like a small bell each time I passed. Drafts curved faithfully. Toward the living room, doors leaned shut with the softness of pages closing. Rooms guided me always inward, until I found myself where the house seemed to want me. The living room dot there. Comfort gathered in full. Cushions slumped warm from the sun. A rug that hushed each step. Ceiling beams converging overhead like carved beads. The room wasn't quite square, but softened, 7-sided, as if shaped more by intent than design. At twilight, the beams looked ornamental, suspended like charms. Even the basement carried that stillness. Its door, freshly painted and oiled, caught the sun as I passed, glowing for a moment before dimming again. As though the house drew its breath inward, I never went down until the power failed one evening. Flashlight in hand, I turned the knob. It yielded easily. The air was cool, mineral, faintly sweet, like my grandparents' wine cellar. Moonlight spilled through the narrow window and fell in neat, careful lines. The floor was too smooth for a basement. The concrete sanded down as though someone had gone to lengths to erase its roughness. The breaker box gleamed against the far wall. Its switches aligned like teeth. I thought of messaging the realtor later to thank her for such careful refurbishment. It was rare to find a place where even the hidden rooms had been treated with such care. I didn't properly meet my neighbors until the 3rd week. I'd seen their houses on my walks. Whimsical variations on a core theme, one rising with clean brick lines, another softened by ivy, another brightened with shutters and a garden spilling slightly onto the sidewalk. I thought now and then that I glimpsed someone through a window or heard a voice carrying across a lawn, but I could never be sure. But that evening they arrived together, like a delegation, each balancing something in their hands, bottles of wine with supermarket ribbons, casserole dishes still steaming under foil, a wicker basket lined with a gingham cloth and heavy with bread. They filled the living room with little effort, arranging themselves on the sofa and chairs as if they'd been here countless times before. Their warmth was immediate, their smiles wide and practiced. In minutes, the house was alive with the clink of glasses, the soft scrape of cutlery on bone china, and voices tumbling into laughter. The food was wonderful, shockingly so. I helped myself to second, third, even fourth servings of lasagna, and tried not to sound overeager as I praised the couple who had brought it. They only exchanged a knowing glance, smiling like proud hosts. Though it was my house dot, at one point the drawer in the kitchen island jammed as I reached for extra cutlery. I tugged uselessly until one of the men chuckled and brushed past. Let. He said. A moment later, I heard his steps on the basement stairs. He reappeared almost instantly with a screwdriver in hand. Triumphant. Managed to find it quick enough. He laughed, as if the tool had been waiting for him. Later, one of the women excused herself to use the toilet. She stopped halfway down the hall, asking which door it was. Just the next one on your left, I said. Ah, she replied, nodding with certainty, as though I had only confirmed what she already knew. Curious, I asked, did you know the people who lived here before? For a heartbeat, the room seemed to pause. Then one of them nodded, smiling as he set his glass down. Oh yes, he said. We knew them all. Another added with a chuckle that was just a little too smooth. We know this house very well. Indeed, by the time the plates were scraped clean and the last drops of wine drunk, I was flushed with warmth, not only from the alcohol, but from the strange sense of inclusion, of being woven seamlessly into their circle. At the door, they thanked me profusely, as though I'd hosted them, pressing my hand or patting my shoulder before vanishing into the night with their empty dishes. I locked the door behind them with a kind of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The house glowed with the afterimage of company, the faint perfume of bread and wine, the hum of laughter still clinging to the walls. For the first time, I thought, perhaps I could belong here. I doused the lights room by room in a slow, meditative rhythm. The old floorboards creaking bathed my steps, until only my bedroom glowed faintly upstairs. Dot later, with the window cracked open, I sipped the last half glass of wine and let the cool night air wash over me. The houses across the street were still lit, squares of gold burning against the dark. Yet no shadows moved behind those curtains. No silhouettes passed in front of lamps. The facade stared back at me, silent and blank, glowing only to insist. They were alive. I told myself the neighbors must simply be tired after the long dinner. The thought soothes me. I lay down, listening as the house settled around me, words easing, pipes sighing. And just as sleep began to take me, I heard it, something deeper, muffled, rising from beneath the floorboards. A sound almost too faint to catch, like the house itself had sighed. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds in its usual pale strips. I showered, dressed, made coffee, ordinary rituals, grounding me in the start of another workday. But when I stepped outside, briefcase in hand, I noticed the street was as empty as the night before. The same houses stood in their neat variations, lights still humming in windows, but not a single person stirred. No slamming of car doors, no joggers, no children waiting for the bus. Even the air seemed to hush itself down. Was it always this quiet? In the mornings, I lingered longer than I should have, scanning for the smallest sign of life, until finally I muttered that it was none of my business and walked on. Work passed uneventfully, but in a good way. A respectful, peaceful work environment where everyone just sat down, got their work done without fuss, where Exchanges in the break room felt like breaths of fresh air, rather than heavy with tireless gossip and backhanded compliments. Yet when I returned home at dusk, I kept noticing how quiet it all was. The houses lit like stage props, but no, cast to play their parts. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, feeling a strange relief to be swallowed again by my own silence. It was peaceful here, wasn't it? Quieter than anywhere I had lived before. Thought this was the kind of life, the kind of neighborhood I'd always aspired to live in. But as I moved about the evening, reheating my leftover casserole, thumbing through a new book, readying for bed, the quiet never really settled. I kept catching myself looking out at my neighbors' windows, hoping for some sign, any at all, of movement, but it never came. A peculiar sort of liminality where you felt alone yet not. Something about the way the pipes kept knocking deep below the basement every half hour or so kept me ever so slightly on edge too. That and the way the basement door glowed in the setting sun, in hazy hues of crimson melting into amber, like the threatening flare of some watchful, venomous creature, made me wary of it. But of course, the power went out again that very night. Hilarious. I grabbed my torch. Reluctant but resigned, I sighed before flicking it on and navigating my way down to the basement. In daylight. The house felt calm, almost protective, as if its walls had been storing quiet for years and were willing to share it with me. But at night, without the ambient low light filtering through curtains, the silence seemed to sharpen. The hallways felt longer, the corners heavier, the ceilings higher. Every pane of glass reflected my own movements back at me, as though something else were watching just behind, and then there were the faint pinpricks I sometimes noticed only in the darkest corners, tiny red motes, too dim to be dust, too steady to be tricks of my eyes. I told myself they were from the appliances, some unseen standby light or sensor. Still, once seen, they followed me, like scattered eyes half buried in shadow. I began to suspect that the piece I'd admired by day was only a mask, and that in the dark the house showed its truer face. The door swung open soundlessly as I opened it. A scent met me, cold and strong, carrying with it a scent that reminded me of neither mildew nor dust, but something much earthier, like disturbed ground. I descended, noticing the way the light of my torch seemed to shiver without command. Pipes and boxes, stacked furniture, the expected clutter of an old basement greeted me. I found the fuse box, flipped a breaker, and heard the house above me click and hum back to life. I was about to turn and leave, but something about the way the dust particles caught in my torch beam, as if tugged by a draft from deeper in. The dark drew my attention. I followed it a few steps past the reach of the singular bulb overhead, until my torchlight met a section of the wall where the stone looked different, rougher, and lower to the floor, half hidden behind a shelving unit. I thought I had seen an opening, narrow, almost nothing, just enough to let that strange air breathe through. I stood there longer than I should have, staring, listening. It felt like the house was holding its breath with me. I crouched, bringing my face closer to the gap and pointing my torch into the crack. The draft slid cool across my face, carrying with it that same raw scent of turned earth. The space beyond was narrow, irregular, not a tunnel so much as a crack in the stone, but deep enough that I couldn't really see where it ended. I leaned, in squinting, waiting for the beam to catch on something solid. For a few seconds there was nothing, only shadow piled on shadow, my own breath shallow in the confined space. I sighed, making a note to myself to find a way to seal it off when I had the time. But just as I began to withdraw my head, I thought I saw it, the faintest glimmer. 2 points suspended in the black, catching the light for a heartbeat before sinking back again. Not bright, not obvious, but enough to give the unmistakable impression of something looking back. I froze, I looked again. A pair of eyes, yearning, patient, like a child waiting for a piece of candy, unsure what to do. I wordlessly stood up and headed back up, too afraid to react. I slammed the basement door behind me and stood there in the hall, chest heaving, the silence of the house pressing closer on me. Upstairs, the lights glowed steadily again, calm and ordinary, as though nothing had happened at all. Sleep never came. I lay awake in the upstairs bedroom, staring at the ceiling while the clock ticked steadily on the dresser. Every creak of the settling house, every whisper of wind at the shutters set my nerves on edge. When at last the windows began to gray with dawn, it felt less like the start of a new day and more like a reprieve, thin, temporary. The neighborhood outside was the same as before. Lawns trimmed, curtains drawn, driveways empty. The houses simply sat still and shone with their quiet lights. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe everyone simply had places to be earlier than I did. Regardless, walking to the car, I couldn't help but feel the weight of 100 eyes, all unseeing behind those curtain windows. Work did not go well. I sat at my desk fighting to keep upright, fumbling simple tasks, letting emails pile without answer. By midday, my supervisor frowned, then sighed. "You're no good till it's half asleep. Go home, get some rest." I didn't argue, but I didn't really want to go home either. I tried going to a nearby cafe, 2 blocks over from my office. It was there that my mind finally got some reprieve. The chatter of strangers, the soft hiss of the espresso machine, the familiar clink of porcelain, all of it wrapped me in a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. I ordered another coffee then. Another, trying to stretch the afternoon out as long as possible. I watched the rain bead against the window, people passing by with their umbrellas. Anything to keep my thoughts away from the crack in my basement. But exhaustion is a patient hunter. By the third refill, my hands shook with fatigue. And my vision, blurred at the edges, I realized miserably that I couldn't outrun sleep forever. When I finally pushed myself up from the table and stepped back into the damp air, the only place left to go was home. Back in the house, I lay on my sofa, restlessly. The basement kept creeping its way back into my mind. What had I really seen? Surely nothing. Just a trick of the light, nerves wound tightly by the outage. And yet, I sighed, getting up and walking toward the basement door again. I paced back, a few times, before finally committing. Hesitantly, I turned the knob and descended once more. The air was cool, still. The shelves stood steady, undisturbed. I crouched at the same place, torch in hand, and found the gap utterly ordinary. A thin seam in the stone, no deeper than a foot. Nothing stirred. Nothing stared back. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Everything was normal again. Perfectly, disappointingly normal, just as I had hoped. That evening, as I was finally getting comfortable again, there was a knock at the door. The same group as before stood on the porch, the women with their practiced smiles, the men carrying covered dishes. I let them in, though something about their presence felt different this time, as if a thread had pulled taut. They settled in the living room again, chatting lightly, their voices hushed, careful. The food was good, better than I'd expected, but the atmosphere clung close, like damp air. Between mouthfuls, I found myself blurting, "So, what are you? All due? For work? I mean, I've noticed the mornings are always quiet." The question landed heavier than I intended. For a beat too long, no one answered. Then one of the men chuckled, though it sounded forced. "We keep busy," he said. Another nodded quickly, adding, "Odd schedules, you know how it is." They moved the conversation long before I could press further. Soon after, they excused themselves, leaving behind the remains of the meal and a faint unease that lingered long after the door shut. I walked them to the porch, waved as they split off toward their homes, then, on impulse, hurried to the window. From behind the curtain, I watched one of the couples, a man in his heavy coat, a woman clutching his arm. They walked without a word, their steps almost too even, too measured. At their door, they didn't glance around, didn't fumble with keys, just slipped inside as if the house had opened to them. I waited, watching the windows for some sign of light or movement. None came. Instead, through a narrow pane near the ground, I saw them descend the stairs. A door opened, a dim glow flickered once. and then they were gone, swallowed by their basement. They never came back up. Sleep became a strained effort. From that night onwards, I kept getting this urge to sit up and peek out at my neighbors' homes. Even when I did commit to sleep, I would constantly startle awake to some faint creaking and rumbling deep in the bowels of the house. And though I told myself it was the house settling, the sound had a way of crawling into my chest and sitting there every morning. I was gray with exhaustion, my usual coffee just barely keeping me awake. Work suffered. Several times I nearly nodded off at my desk. Once during a meeting, my supervisor suggested I take some time off, just a week, to clear your head. I agreed, though I knew no week would be enough at home. I found myself glued to the windows. I watched the houses like a man waiting for a signal, desperate for proof of life. The lights came on at dusk, glowed steadily until dawn, but not once did I see a curtain twitch or a door open. No one came out for work. No deliveries were ever made. No children played in the yards. Nothing. It was as if the whole street were a set piece staged for my benefit, while the real activity lay hidden somewhere, perhaps underground at night. The noises grew bolder, low thuds, faint clatters, sometimes even the impression of a voice carried through the vents. Each time, I would sit up in bed, heart hammering, staring toward the basement door at the end of the hall. I wanted to go down to fling it open and see once and for all what waited there, but the thought of facing it froze me in place. Instead, I lay awake until dawn, watching the ceiling, counting every sound, knowing I wouldn't sleep, knowing I couldn't. The days began to blur together. I told myself I was only taking time off to rest, but I hardly left the house. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, I kept my silent vigil. The neighbors' windows stared back at me like blind eyes, never once blinking. I tried to reason it out. Maybe everyone here worked nights. Maybe it was some kind of community agreement. Quiet mornings, quiet evenings, nobody making a fuss. But even in saying it, I could hear the falseness. I knew what I had seen, or rather what I hadn't. I knew the sounds beneath. My house weren't just figments of my imagination. It was in the stillness of one early afternoon that something inside me finally cracked. I had pulled the curtains tight against the light, and in the dimness I noticed it again, that faint, glowing seven-pointed star from the light of the upper window. I'd always thought it charming once. Now, it looked like an eye, sharp-edged and cruel, glaring down into the room, glaring at me. The living room too felt different. The way the crooked walls leaned in on me, threateningly, conspiring to press the room shut. The ceiling beams that once caught light like beads on a string, pressed down heavily, the joints knotting together in sharp, unnatural angles. Less a pattern, but a snare, a geometry that tried to bind me inside it, closing tighter the longer I stared. And then I saw them again in the dimness. The red specks, tiny pinpricks, barely visible in the darkened corridors. One above the archway, another tucked near the ceiling vent, another staring from the hallway like a burning insect. I held my breath, suddenly certain I was not alone. I rose, slow as if my movements were being watched, and turned toward the nearest light. It was no trick of exhaustion this time. Leaning closer, I saw, nestled in the tangle of a small potted plant, the faint glassy bulge of a lens. I knew it then. I was being watched. They were watching me. The thought struck so sudden I was already moving, stumbling out the door and across the street. My heart thudded like it would split my ribs. I half expected a curtain to twitch, a shout to stop me, but nothing stirred. The crooked, shuttered house loomed. I set my hand on the knob. It turned too easily. The lock had clicked, yes, but shallowly, like a toy made only to sound real. The door swung inward at the faintest push. Inside, the air was cool and stale, as though sealed for years. The living room was tidy too tidy. A half-read magazine curled yellow on the table, cushions plumped, curtains half open. It felt staged, preserved, not lived in. The silence here was heavier than in my own house. Not absence of sound, but absence of life. Every object seemed set, slightly apart from itself. My breathing rasped too loud as my gaze fixed on the plain wooden door at the end of the hall. The basement. I told myself I'd only look, only open it and see. Though my hand was already on the knob, already turning, the hinges moaned as I pulled it back. A damp draft curled up from below. I crouched at the top of the stairs and peered down. The light didn't reach far, just the first few steps, then shadow. A smell of earth rose up, faintly metallic dot, and steadying myself against the frame, I began to descend. The steps creaked under my weight, each one louder than the last. I half expected the neighbors to come rushing in, demanding to know what I was doing in their house, but no one came. The air grew colder the farther down I went, the draft sharper against my skin. The basement was ordinary, too ordinary. A washing machine sat in the corner, boxes stacked neatly along the wall. The faint smell of detergent clinging to the stillness. For a moment, I almost laughed at myself. Had I really imagined everything? Of course I hadn't. I narrowed my eyes, searching for what I wasn't sure, and then my sight caught the far wall dot. It was there again. The same uneven gap I had in my own basement, the one I had never dared to inspect too closely. A rough seam where the stone and concrete didn't quite meet, as though the house had been set atop foundations that belonged to something older, something the builders had merely covered rather than disturbed. I crouched down, pulse jittering against my throat. The gap was wider here, easily large enough to slip a hand through. A breath of cold air pulsed from within, damp and insistent, carrying with it the faintest murmur, so faint I couldn't be sure if it was sound at all, or merely the suggestion of it. Shaped by the stone, I should have turned back. Instead, I pressed my palms against the jagged edges, and the wall shifted. Not much, just enough. Plaster sloughed away in sodden flakes, and beyond it lay a blackness, so absolute it seemed to drink the light from the basement. I don't know what drove me then. Exhaustion. Obsession. Or some older compulsion seeping out through the crack. Perhaps only the need for finality, the need to force the silence to speak. Whatever it was, I pushed myself forward, scraping through until my shoulders cleared, then my hips, then the soles of my shoes, and I was inside. The air was clammy, mineral heavy, pressing against my lungs. My flashlight shivered over raw stone, catching on lines that didn't look accidental, rather smooth. As if worn down by endless repetition, this was a passage. A tunnel sloped downward at once. A crude incline spiraling into earth. My shoes scraped. Loose gravel that hissed downslope ahead of me. I hesitated, but the silence behind me felt heavier than what waited below, so I descended. The air changed as I went. Cooler, yes, but laden too, as if with centuries of dust ground too fine to ever settle. Each breath tasted metallic, faintly briny, as though seawater had long ago seeped into the rock and lingered still. Sound began to emerge. Not voices. Not exactly. More like the collected breath of many people whispering just at the threshold of hearing. Not rising or falling, but merging into a single tide pool of sound. I froze, straining to distinguish words. None came, only that endless susurrus, like waves sucking at shingle, patient and eternal. Every few steps I looked back. The pale rectangle of the basement was shrinking, already no more than a warped glimmer. My stomach clenched. If that wall sealed itself again, if it had ever been a wall at all, then no one would ever know I was down here. Still, I kept walking, followed the whispering. The passage twisted illogically, curving left, plunging downward, rising again. My sense of distance unraveled. I could not tell whether I'd gone 50 feet or 500. The air was cooler still, carrying the musk of confinement, a scent like bodies packed too close together in the dark, though none were there. Then, at the precipice of nausea and misdirection, I noticed it, a hairline crack in the tunnel wall. Faintly familiar, I leaned closer, pressing my eye against it, and my heart lurched. On the other side of the thin veil of earth was a room I knew too well. The bare concrete floor, the slant of the steps, the jumble of paint cans in the corner. My basement. The whispers swelled, as if pleased by my recognition. For a mad instant, I felt like they were urging me onward, coaxing me deeper into the labyrinth that stitched neighbor to neighbor, home to home, until perhaps the whole street was webbed together in a single buried artery. Following the noise, I eventually squeezed through a narrow cleft in the stone, the rough edges rasping my shoulders and peeling cloth from my sleeves. Finding myself in a vast chamber, the air hit me like damp wool. Heavy, wet, and sour with the layered stench of decay. The ceiling hung so low I had to stoop, its surface bristling with roots and beads of black condensation that fattened and burst with slow, deliberate ticks. Candles jammed into fissures spat and wept down their stubs, their glow smeared and multiplied in the sweat of the stone. Shadows leaned unnaturally long, folding and overlapping until they seemed to bend around some hidden core, as though the walls themselves recoiled from illumination. On the earthen floor lay 6 bodies, each arranged with care along the prongs of a vast figure gouged into the soil. Death had marked each differently. One collapsed into an articulated cage of bone, still wearing the husk of a funeral suit. Another shriveled to a leathern skin that clung tight as drumhide. Another bloated, with the greenish swell of half-preserved flesh. A slick of fat glistened at the jaw of one, hardened to yellow wax where it touched the dirt. The mingled odors of sweet corruption, dry mildew, and old earth rolled together into something nauseating, but almost reverent, like incense turned. Soured out the 7th space gaped empty, its soil churned with fresh scarring, as though impatient hands had redrawn the lines again and again, sharpening the groove to accept what must soon complete it. Then I looked up. The walls were crowded with photographs, whole families smiling stiffly on front porches. Children's portraits, candid shots from kitchens and backyards. Beneath them, yellowed leases, school certificates, and utility bills were pinned in meticulous rows. One cluster of images showed a man and woman whose features matched 2 of the bodies on the ground. Another cluster matched the other's and then, farther along, I saw my own face. My parents, my siblings, my resume. Copies of letters I'd written years ago. Camera feeds flickered above it all. My living room, my bedroom, my basement stairs. Pattern was undeniable. These were the former residents of my house. I shuddered to think what that meant for me. Around the chamber's edge, the neighbors stood in a ring, their faces half lost in the glow, lips working in a ceaseless chant. The sound was not speech so much as grinding cadence, breath drawn, ragged, consonants bitten short, syllables collapsing into one another until they became a shingle of sound that scraped the ear raw. I pressed myself against the damp, sticky wall, hardly daring to breathe. Their voices rose and fell in uneven cadence, half prayer, half conversation, like a crowd rehearsing lines from different plays. He suspects, no matter, tonight he belongs. To our Lord? Then, cutting through the babble, came a tone I knew at once. Calm, polished. Practiced. The realtor. The same voice that had once praised crown molding and promised a house with character. Smooth, unshakable. The voice of someone who never failed to close a deal. His place has been waiting, she said, her words rounded and precise. The walls already know his name. Our Lord already knows his name. They resisted too, murmured a man, almost sheepish. They fought, said another. They wept, sighed a third, almost fond. But all children sleep in the end. As will the 7th, the realtor replied, rising above them. And when the 7th sleeps, the circle will be complete. Our Lord will breathe through his lungs. Our Lord will see through his eyes. A low murmur rippled through the circle. Threads of hunger, relief, longing, tangled together. Is close. He is ready. He will open the way. Silence fell, sudden and crushing, as though the air itself had been sucked from the chamber. Only the faint hiss of a candle remained. My hand slipped against the loose stone. It clattered to the floor. Small, ordinary, but in that silence it exploded like a gunshot. The murmurs died. No one moved. Did you hear that? A voice whispered. The silence deepened, shivering, brittle. Then, all at once, every head in a circle turned. Not one after another, all together, too fast, too clean, like marionettes jerked on the same string. Dozens of blank eyes, glinting in candlelight, fixed on the dark where I crouched. For a heartbeat, the whole room held its breath. Then the realtor's voice, soft as velvet, closing over a coffin lid. He is here. Adrenaline seized me like a hand on my spine. I lurched upright and bolted, stone skinning my arms as I tore down the passage. Behind me came the shuffle of shoes on earth, not frantic, not clumsy, but steady. Too steady. Dozens of feet striking in perfect unison, every step slamming the chamber like a drumbeat inside my skull. Then the voices followed, slipping between the rhythm of their march like oil through cloth. Don't run, one said, hollow, and even, we don't want you hurting yourself. Everything will be okay, crooned another. The syllables thick and honey dash, slow, the tunnel pressed in tighter, my vision strobing at the edges. I dropped to my knees, palms skidding on damp stone, groping for the slit of light I swore had been there. My basement. My way out. Behind me the footsteps never faltered, filling the space, filling me, their march in my blood, now one deafening rhythm, a heartbeat not my own. I shoved a shoulder into the gap, bone grinding against rock. The stone tore at my clothes, bit into my skin. For a moment I was wedged, ribs caught, lungs clenching, the earth holding me fast. The voices drifted closer, weaving between each other like a lullaby. Come back. You don't have to be afraid. I clawed forward, skin peeling, breath shredding in my throat. My hips caught next, and I had to twist, spine screaming, until the stone finally released me with a soundless scrape. I spilled through at last, sprawling across the cold slab of my basement floor, the sting of torn flesh sharp in the air. Behind me, the voices did not raise or falter. They seeped through the crack as though the wall itself were speaking. Steady as a prayer, I stumbled up from the basement, clawing for balance, crashing through the kitchen and down the hall. Every breath was a rasp, every step dragging a streak of grit and blood across the floorboards. The door loomed before me, simple, familiar, absurd in its ordinariness. The frosted glass glowed faintly, a pale imitation of daylight, safety, escape. Life. I seized the knob with both hands, slick with sweat and blood. It turned, yes, it turned like it always had. But when I pulled, the house answered clack not the dull, human sound of a deadbolt. No, this was sharper, metallic, hungry, a sound like teeth closing around bone. The seams along the frame shuddered. The wood moaned, fibers tightening like sinew, as if the whole house clenched at once to hold me inside. No, my own voice came back to me, ragged and unrecognizable. I rushed back to the basement door and through the bolt, then dragged a shelf into place, books and tools crashing to the floor in a rain of useless clatter. For a moment, silence. Only my pulse in my ears. Then the sound of the knob turning, softly, patiently. A creak, then a slow knock. 3 measured raps, murmurs from behind the wood, sweet and stale. Don't lock us out. We all belong here together. Panic clawed higher in my throat. I staggered through the hall into the kitchen, grabbing at the back door. The knob twisted beneath my palm, but the same click followed, the wood tightening as if bracing itself to hold me in. A shape caught my eye, motion at the window. I turned across the yard. My neighbor was stepping from his porch, stiff and deliberate, eyes fixed on me. Then another, and another. They crossed the lawn without a sound, gathering along my house. They pressed themselves to the windows, every one of them, palms spread flat. Faces leaned close, cheek to pane. Their eyes stared through at me, unblinking, catching the faint light and strange reflections that looked too bright, too wet. A dozen mouths moved at once, muffled by the glass, whispering things I couldn't make out, but all of them smiling, all of them watching. The whispers overlapped, swelled, Some voices turning sharp, almost scolding. Stop it. Stop it. Our Lord won't be happy with you. Others curled into a cloying sing-song. Don't worry, sweetheart. You're safe here. We'll take care of you. The house vibrated with it, the glass humming faintly as their breath fogged the panes. Smiles stretched too wide, too steady, splitting into snarls and croons. I stumbled back, heart hammering, staring at the impossible wall of faces around me. Every window on the first floor was filled. I was sealed inside, trapped in my own house, their voices clawing at me from all directions. Panic seized me. My eyes shot upward, the stairs. The bedroom. I bolted, 2 steps at a time, my body lurching forward as if chased by the noise swelling below. I burst into my room, chest heaving, and grabbed at the curtain. Outside, my car, parked at the curb. My only chance. For a moment, I froze. The chanting rising beneath me, swelling into something that wasn't words anymore, just a pressure in my skull. Then I drove my heel into the glass dot. It shattered around me in an explosion of cold shards. The afternoon air slicing my face. Without another thought, I hurled myself through, down onto the pavement. The pain was immediate, white hot, snapping through my leg like fire. My ankle folded under me with a sickening crack. I screamed, or thought I did. The sound drowned in the roar of blood in my ears. I rolled onto my side, vision warping, breath hitching against the shock. The night smelled of iron and dust. My face wet where glass had sliced it. Dot moved out. My car loomed just yards away, unreal and shining under. The streetlight! I clawed across the lawn, dragging my useless leg. Grass licked beneath my palms. Every shift of my weight sent agony screaming up my body. But the chanting from the house was louder now, echoing out through the broken window. Their voices a chorus spilling into the night. Come back. You're safe with us. Don't. Run. He is waiting for you. I hit the curb, fumbling at my pocket, keys slick with blood. Somehow I got them into the lock. Somehow I turned. The handle gave and I dragged myself inside, collapsing against the steering wheel. Gasping, the horn blaring once in a long, muffled note. The house behind me pulsed with voices, calling, pleading, demanding. Then the sound changed. No longer steady, no longer coaxing. It broke apart. Ragged sobs, hiccuping wails, voices tearing themselves raw. Some keen like children. Others moaned low and guttural, as though their throats were splitting under the strain, and their mouths, God, their mouths. Lips quivering, stretching too wide, some grinning, some crumpled into masks of grief, every face vibrating with need. The voices overlapped until words were nothing but noise, then reassembled, jagged and broken. Our Lord needs you. Our Lord needs your body. What will our Lord do without you? Some shrieked it high and thin. Others crooned it like nursery songs, syllables slurring through their sobs. It was a chorus of grief, of hunger, of worship, a sound that didn't belong in human throats. The nearest neighbor pressed her face against the windshield, teeth bared in a rictus that was half a smile, half a sob. Her breath fogged the glass in frantic bursts, and she dragged her tongue across, it leaving a wet smear that ran down like tears. Don't leave us. Don't leave him. Don't leave. Their wailing rattled the street, a dirge swelling until it shook the engine itself. I twisted the key once, twice. My ankle throbbed like fire, the pain snapping my vision white, but I forced it again. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared dot as I slammed the pedal. The car lurched forward, wheels thudding over bodies that broke apart too easily. Like brittle effigies stuffed with wet leaves dot in the rearview mirror, they collapsed to their knees. Clawing at the pavement, arms outstretched, their cries echoing after me. Not anger, not threat, just a howling endless grief. I didn't stop. Driving until the houses thinned, until the highway signs gave way to the smear of city lights. Every throb of my ankle was a reminder that I wasn't dreaming. I pushed until the tank hit red and found a cheap motel off the interstate, the kind, with buzzing neon and a clerk who didn't bother to look up. For 3 nights I barely slept. Curtains drawn tight, TV humming low. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glass, the mouths, the way their palms pressed against me, like the house itself was breathing. I lived off vending machine snacks and the emergency cash I'd crammed. In my glove box months ago and forgotten dot on the fourth morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. My leg was swollen purple, every nerve screaming, and I knew I had to tell someone, anyone. The police station was fluorescent and humming, antiseptic, in a way that almost calmed me. I stood at the counter, swaying on my good foot, and when the officer asked what was wrong, the words tumbled out. There were people, they were at my house, they wouldn't let me leave, they knew my name, they said things about a lord. I think they wanted to sacrifice me to it. My voice broke. I gripped the counter, knuckles white, trying to steady my breath. The officer gave me that look, a careful, measured one they must practice for drunks and lunatics dot, and then my gaze drifted, just for a moment, to the badge on his chest, and I froze. The badge gleamed under the light, sharper than it should. Every line too clear. I'd seen them before. Hell, maybe this one had always been like that. But looking at it now, it seemed wrong, too perfect, too deliberate, each point cutting the air like a blade. Was it? My throat closed. I forced the words out. Was it always a 7-pointed star? My family doesn't age like other people. My grandmother was 98 when she passed, but she looks 65, maybe younger. My great-uncle is 102 and still chops his own firewood. We've always credited to good genes and our one sacred tradition. The renewal stew, served at every major family gathering. It was a rich, dark, savory stew that made you feel warm from the inside out, full of life. When Grandma Rose died, I was the one who inherited the old family farmhouse. Tucked away in her study, I finally found it, the original handwritten recipe. Book bound in cracked leather. I felt a thrill, like I was finally being let in on the secret. I opened it to the page for the renewal stew. It was mostly blank. There were no ingredients listed for the stew itself, only 2 cryptic notes in my great-great-grandmother's bitery script. For the broth, see the cellar instructions. For the seasoning, see the attic instructions. The cellar was damp and smelled of earth. Behind a stack of old canning jars, I found a loose stone in the wall. Pulling it free revealed a dark, hidden chamber. Inside, arranged in neat rows, were a dozen large, unglazed clay pots, filled with a dark, peaty soil. A thick, pale, gnarled root snaked out of the soil in each pot. Looking disturbingly like a human hand, a dusty journal sat on a small table. The entries, dating back to the 1800s, describe the process. When a member of our family dies, they aren't buried or cremated, they are planted. Their bodies are prepared with a special mixture of herbs and laid to rest in these pots. Over the years, the soil and the body produce a life root. This root is harvested, boiled for 3 days, and becomes the broth of the renewal stew. I felt a wave of nausea. We weren't just eating stew. We were consuming the concentrated essence of our dead ancestors. Shaking, I went to the attic. In a locked trunk, I found a collection of small, ornate silver boxes, each engraved with the name of a living family member. I found my name freshly engraved. Inside each box was a small, sharp obsidian knife. Another journal explained the final step, the seasoning. It wasn't a spice. At each gathering, every family member present must make a living contribution to the stew. A few drops of blood, a sliver of fingernail, a tear cried directly into the pot. This offering of the living is what awakens the ancestral broth. I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. It was a grotesque, cannibalistic ritual. I vowed I would never participate. The next major gathering was for the autumn equinox. I made an excuse not to go, claiming I had the flu. I felt a sense of righteous defiance. A week later, my mother called, her voice thin and weak. "Your Aunt Carol isn't doing well," she said. "She's had a sudden decline." I drove to my aunt's house. The woman who opened the door was a stranger. She looked 80 years old, her skin thin and translucent like parchment, her hair patchy and white. But it was Aunt Carol. She was only 58. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, hungry light. "You didn't come?" she rasped, her hand gripping my arm with surprising strength. Her fingernails were cracked and yellow. The stew ... it wasn't strong enough. It's always weaker when someone is missing. I finally understood. We don't have... Good? Genes, we have a curse. A rapid, horrifying decay that is constantly trying to claim us. The stew isn't a fountain of youth. It's the only thing that holds the rot at bay. We aren't living long lives. We are desperately, grotesquely staving off an accelerated death. The winter solstice is next month. My mother called again yesterday. She told me my great-uncle's hands are so stiff he can no longer hold an axe. She told me she found a new gray hair, and when she plucked it, a small patch of skin came with it. Then she asked if I would be coming home for the solstice. Her voice was casual, but the question hung in the air, heavy and raw. They need me. They need my contribution. I'm looking at the small silver box with my name on it. The little black knife sits inside, cold and sharp. I have a choice. I can go, participate in this stomach-churning ritual, and feed the curse to keep my family looking young and vibrant while I know the horrifying truth. Or I can stay here, clean and pure, and watch them all fall apart, knowing that the same rot is flowing through my own veins, waiting for its turn.